Chapter 1827. His huge eyes were scarlet, cold and merciless, as if they were the coldest thing in the world. They turned and stared straight at Hengupas in the distance. However, his hatred for Hengupas was not even as great as the roar coming from his eyes. Damn chef! Heaven and earth shook. It was a rage that flowed from the depths of his soul. It was a deep hatred for the chef. Yes, how much he hated the chef. After thousands of years of scheming, he finally woke up, gathered his fleshly body, and made Soul God's supreme body reappear in the world. However, he had only been acting tough for a few seconds before he was suppressed by the chef with a dish. This made him furious. Soul Demon hated chefs from the bottom of his heart. He remembered that a long, long time ago, he was also suppressed by a chef with a dish. That time, he was suppressed for thousands of years and fell into a deep sleep. And now he was suppressed by the chef again. Thousands of years of waiting had been exchanged for a reincarnation. F***CKU chef. Soul God's roar shook the universe and made the arrays around him rumble as if they were about to collapse at any moment. In Hengu Pass, many immortals and deities rose to their feet, their faces grave. Tongtian flew on his sword and appeared in front of the terrible black smoke with just one step. He stared coldly at the black ball. 1,000 years was too short, and the day Soul God broke the seal was not far away. Tongtian's face was unsightly. Buddha, Goddess Nuwa, and Yuanshi Tianzuan also landed. The four almighty experts of the primitive universe hovered in midair and sighed. Soul God had gathered his fleshly body, and his power was comparable to the primitive universe's will of the great path. Even a perfected chaotic saint could not stop him. Once he broke the seal, the disaster he would bring would definitely destroy heaven and earth. If the primitive universe fell and soul demons were allowed to grow everywhere, the whole universe would become a land of death. Soul demons were parasites of the universe. His scarlet eyes turned and finally rested on Tongtian. You can't suppress me for long. When I finish this mouthful, you will all die, he said coldly. On the dish, the last mouthful of food had a weak energy circulating. The pseudo-god of cooking dish, the stately painting, was, after all, not the real stately painting, so it was a little overwhelmed. Roar. It was like the roar of a demon. In the dish, a golden light flashed. The roars of dragons, tigers, sparrows, and turtles filled the air. He suppressed the evil power once more. However, everyone could feel that the dish's power had begun to fall into a disadvantageous position against Soul God. It couldn't be suppressed for much longer. 1,000 years have passed in the blink of an eye. This Soul God is about to come out again. Our arrays can't suppress him. The heavenly primogenitor sighed. We need to think of a way out. If the soul demons come out, we need to leave behind a wisp of primordial fire to pass on the future of the human race. The four primordial world big shots sighed. Sect leader Tongtian's face darkened. He performed a sword incantation, and streams of sword energy rushed into the clouds and entered the array to strengthen it. The soul demon universe is restless again. New soul overlords of the 7 great sins have been born, and a new strongest soul overlord has appeared. The catastrophe of the past has descended once again. This time it's really a crisis of life and death. Nuwa said. They knew very well that once the Soul God broke free, he would lead the army of soul demons and defeat the primitive universe's army in one fell swoop. There was no way to stop him. In fact, they could not stop him at all. Without Bufang's help, the soul demons' attributes were too disgusting. Their growth rate and strength, under the leadership of the Soul God, would definitely make them the strongest army in the universe, unless they suppressed him with food. Although the heavenly primogenitor and the others did not quite understand why the Soul God would be disgusted by food, however, perhaps this was the counterbalance of life. 1,000 years had passed. They had also trained many chefs, but it was far from enough. Although these chefs were very skilled, They were not enough to face the Soul God. In fact, they were too weak to face the great soul overlords. Although they had used great means to raise the cultivation bases of these chefs to the level of chaotic saints, the price was huge, but that was all they could do. Those chefs were that man's apprentices. If it were not for that, they would not have found such an opportunity. Tong Tian heaved a sigh. Perhaps only the return of that man could truly suppress the Soul God. What a pity! Send someone to inform the heaven gods of the chaotic universe and the dukes of Void City. We need to discuss a plan, Tong Tian said. His voice faded away. In the distant starry sky, a mighty immortal cupped his fist and flew away. He had gone to deliver the message. The return of the Soul God was not just a catastrophe for the primitive universe. It was a catastrophe for both the chaotic universe and Void City. As for the experts of the other small universes, since they could not reach this level, they naturally ignored it. Rumble in the distance, monstrous black smoke was sweeping and devouring the dish that was blooming with golden light. Tens of thousands of immortals hovered in midair, suppressing the array. Sect leader Tong Tian and the others flew away. Clearly, they had gone to discuss a plan. Bufang did not return to planet immortality. He walked in the starry sky with Xiao Bai and Wushuang, passing by many small worlds. Each of the 3,000 worlds had its own merit. There were too many things that Bufang could learn. For him, the mortal world was a way to settle and temper his state of mind. Wushuang followed behind Bufang. As they walked, he saw a lot. His sword became steadier and steadier, and many of its ostentatiousness disappeared, replaced by a kind of restrained emotion. His 7 emotions sword became steadier. Perhaps all this was because Bufang was helping him. He had helped him deepen his foundation. Wushuang knew this too, so every time he traveled in a small world, he worked hard to improve his cultivation base. The universe was boundless. There were countless stars. He could not walk all of them. However, he could feel the endless life in a limited number of stars. This was what Bufang wanted to comprehend. In fact, the emotions bred in every planet with life were the same, so it was not difficult to understand the similarities. What Bufang needed to do was sort out these similarities. He needed to comprehend the emotional path that belonged to him. Bufang's emotional path was not the 7 emotions and 6 desires, and it was not even a simple emotion. His emotion contained many emotions in the world. The emotions of people, objects, and all things in the world. It was very broad, so it was difficult to walk. Wushuang's aura became more and more unstable. Finally, one day on a planet, Wushuang sat there, his body covered with fallen leaves. His aura seemed to be so old that he was on the verge of death. In the distance, Xiao Bai and Bufang sat cross-legged by the campfire. Bufang was roasting a sweet potato. The simple sweet potato was roasted until it was charred black. It looked very ugly. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flashed with anticipation. Rumble Wushuang's aura fluctuated. The earth began to shake violently. It was as if it was about to rush into the starry sky. Wushuang's aura kept soaring, streaks of sword intent floated around his body. All the lives on this planet with life knelt on the ground, not daring to move. They felt a crushing pressure in the hierarchy of life. That kind of aura made their hearts palpitate. A saint had attained the Tao. They did not dare to offend him. All the experts knelt on the ground, feeling the sound of the great path flowing between heaven and earth. It was a sound that baptized the hierarchy of life. Many people sat cross-legged on the ground, breaking through as Wushuang broke through. As the ancients said, when a man attained the Tao, his chickens and dogs also ascended to heaven. In fact, it made sense. When a man attained the Tao, the lingering charm of the great path around him was enough to elevate many mortals to the level of immortals. The spiritual energy on the planet kept getting stronger, and everything in the world was flowing. The clouds were broken through by the turbulence. The sweet potatoes Bufang roasted were gradually ripening, giving off steam. He and Xiao Bai each took one. The last one was for Wushuang. When he was done with his breakthrough, he would let him take a bite of the hot sweet potato. He tore open the sweet potato. A ray of golden light burst out of it. Under the black surface was the golden sweet potato meat, which gave off a sweet aroma. The smell deeply tempted one's appetite. He took a bite. A burning sensation clung to his teeth, lips, and tongue. Bufang narrowed his eyes. He breathed a sigh of relief. Xiao Bai also carefully stuffed the sweet potato into his mouth. As the mechanical mouth closed and closed, it trembled like a human. Bufang glanced at Xiao Bai, and the corner of his mouth twitched. "You're just a lump of iron. Are you afraid of heat?" Rumble! A towering beam of sword light soared into the sky. Bufang ate while watching Wushuang's breakthrough. Wushuang's breakthrough was even more powerful than Tongtian's breakthrough to the Saint of the Great Path. Of course, Tongtian was just a clone, so it was normal that his momentum was not strong enough. But now Wushuang could cut through the sky with a sword. His aura kept rising like a stairway to heaven. At the level of a saint of the Great Path, he was strong enough to crush countless experts and even approach a chaotic saint. As for the level of a chaotic saint, Wushuang's foundation was still not strong enough. Or rather, he needed to create his own sword technique so that he could break through to the level of a chaotic saint. Although the Seven Emotions sword path was strong, it was the limit for him to reach the peak of the Saint of the Great Path. It was difficult to become a chaotic saint. But Bufang knew that if he gave Wushuang some time, he would definitely be able to step into the level of a chaotic saint. With his foundation and the level of his sword path, once he became a chaotic saint, he might be able to unleash the power of a perfected saint. Oh! In the primitive universe, Tongtian seemed to sense something. He opened his Dharma eyes and looked through the void. He sensed a terrible sword intent erupting from an ordinary planet with lives. The corner of his mouth curved upward slightly. Wushuang has also become a saint. That's fast. This kind of sword intent reminds me of when I was young. After a long time, Tongtian sighed with emotion again. Those who were related to that man were basically all geniuses. Unfortunately, nowadays, such a talented person would not be of much use to the universe. What Tongtian needed was a formidable chef who could suppress Soul God. The sword light gradually dissipated. Wushuang's eyes flickered with sword intent. He took a step and returned to Bufang's side. "Your Excellency, I did it." Wushuang's expression was very complicated. In just 1,000 years, he had grown from an ordinary swordsman to a saint of the sword path. He could not have imagined this in the past. Strictly speaking, he was a man who had died once. That death was the most important baptism of his soul. It was that death that allowed his realm to keep rising and reach his present level. He took the roasted sweet potato that Bufang threw to him. Wushuang caught it. It was so hot that his hands could not help but tremble. He kept blowing at it. "It's so hot." He had become a saint of the sword path, but he could not even hold a roasted sweet potato. After eating the roasted sweet potatoes, Xiao Chun had already forgotten about the excitement of becoming a martial sage. His heart was filled with only the taste of the roasted sweet potatoes. "It's so King delicious." His fluctuating aura had stabilized, and it was even showing signs of improving further. This roasted sweet potato had helped him stabilize his cultivation base. As expected of His Excellency's roasted sweet potato. "Are you done? Let's go back if you're done," Bufang said. He rose to his feet and patted his linen clothes. Wushuang nodded and carried the iron sword wrapped in rags on his back. Suddenly Wushuang paused. He looked up at the starry sky in the distance. Bufang gave a soft cry of surprise. Outside this extremely ordinary planet with lives, a huge black hole emerged. Inside the black hole, one black meatball after another shot out of it and smashed toward the planet. A top-notch spirit overlord expert came out of it, his eyes were filled with greed. Chapter 1828. With the awakening of the soul god, the soul demons began to wreak havoc. It was a familiar feeling. They invaded the universe, devoured the lives in it, and multiplied themselves. This was the usual routine of the soul demons. This ordinary planet with lives was suspended in a small universe, and it happened to be targeted by a soul overlord this time. Once it was targeted, there would be a massacre. Perhaps because the soul god was still sealed, the soul demons kept a low profile. They did not choose to attack the three powerful universes. They dared not go to the chaotic universe, the primitive universe, or the universe where Void City was. After all, those three universes were guarded by perfected experts. If they went there and were discovered, they would die. Therefore, they specifically chose some remote small universes to attack. They devoured small universes, slaughtered the living beings in them, and turned them into energy to develop themselves. Before this soul overlord had already slaughtered dozens of planets with lives. I smell something delicious. The soul overlord sneered. Behind him, numbered soul demons emerged one after another. One numbered soul demon after another emerged, while ordinary soul demons scrambled to fly toward the star. Although ordinary living beings could not increase their cultivation base too much, no matter how small a mosquito was, it was still meat. As long as they ate enough, their cultivation base would naturally improve. Darkness enveloped the whole planet, causing heaven and earth to tremble in fear. The will of the great path on this planet was powerless in the face of this darkness. Boom, boom, boom. Terrifying soul demons smashed into the ground like meteors, leaving potholes in the ground. They roared and hissed. In this remote area, they did not have to worry about death, so they could unleash their savagery at will. Bufang and Wushuang were about to leave the planet when Wushuang and Bufang arrived. They did not expect such an accident to happen. Looking at the pitch-black hole in the sky, Bufang twitched the corner of his mouth. These soul demons might be a little stupid. Didn't they sense your sword energy? Bufang said to Wushuang. Soul demons? Wushuang's heart skipped a beat. He knew that His Excellency had destroyed his own cultivation base to seal the soul god's leader. He did not expect that the soul demons would appear again and begin to harm the world. He could not tolerate this. Let's go and have a look. Soul overlord meat tastes good. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched, and he somehow missed the soul overlord meat. Back then, he was getting old, and he was starting to reminisce about the past. Bufang shook his head, put his hands behind his back, and soared into the sky with Xiao Bai and Wushuang. Wushuang's divine sense spread out and covered the whole planet in an instant. This time, he had witnessed the horror of the soul demons. Those cruel soul demons were simply the most vicious invaders. Wherever they passed, not even a blade of grass grew. All mortals were devoured. Even 3-year-old babies were not spared. As Wushuang watched, his eyes gradually became angry and cold. Bufang was also expressionless. These damned beasts, Wushuang said coldly. Soul demons feed on living beings and feed on them. They are fearless of the heavenly Tao. This is indeed a heinous crime. Bufang's face was cold. He had not seen the soul demons for 1,000 years, and they were as hateful as ever. The mortals on the planet were terrified. They hugged each other and watched the catastrophe with horror on their faces. In midair, the soul overlord was laughing excitedly. This was the feeling. The more frightened they were, the more delicious humans tasted. Fear was the best seasoning. Rumble! Wushuang finally could not stand it anymore. The iron sword on his back suddenly shook and broke the old rags wrapped around it. Then, he gripped the ancient black sword in his hand. The sound of the sword rang through the sky. Buzz! The sword soared into the sky. Wushuang's face was cold as he flicked the sword with his finger. Ding! A crisp sound rang out. In an instant it enveloped the whole world. Then, one beam of sword energy after another fell from the sky and flew across the entire planet. The soul demons who were wreaking havoc suddenly froze. Then, their scarlet eyes widened as they found that their bodies had been pierced by a beam of sword energy and exploded. The power of the sword energy was truly terrifying. One soul demon after another exploded into pieces. They could not resist it at all. The power of the sword energy filled them with despair. The mortals shrieked in terror. But soon, they found that the sword energy could not hurt them, and they burst into tears of joy. Immortals are here to save us. These damned demons! Wushuang's face was cold. With just one sword strike, he slaughtered all the soul demons on the planet. With just one sword strike, he had slaughtered all the soul demons on the planet. His strength had already grown to an extremely terrifying level. Even a numbered soul demon could not stop one beam of sword energy from him. If he could block one beam, he would be killed by 2 beams of sword energy. All the soul demons on the planet were wiped out. Wushuang held the sword in one hand and walked step by step toward the huge black hole. His target was the laughing Soul Overlord. The Soul Overlord also noticed Wushuang. He roared. A cultivator at the level of a saint of the Great Path? Not only was the Soul Overlord not afraid, but there was even a look of excitement in his eyes. After devouring a saint of the Great Path, his strength could even break through to the level of a top Soul Overlord. Roar! His roar resounded through heaven and earth. One soul demon after another sped out of the black hole behind him. They turned into a black torrent that blotted out the sky and rushed toward Wushuang. Wushuang's face was cold. He shook his hand. The iron sword rumbled. Then, he swung it out. A beam of sword energy that blotted out the sky stretched across the starry sky. Countless soul demons were instantly wiped out by the sword. The Soul Overlord roared and collided with Wushuang's sword energy. However, he was sent flying, and the scales on his body were shattered. The fighting prowess of a saint of the sword path was so terrifying. You want to leave? Wushuang's eyes turned cold as he looked at the Soul Overlord, who was about to jump into the black hole. He took a step forward. The black iron sword gathered into a circle around him. Countless beams of sword energy swirled around the circle and shot out. They moved extremely fast, whistling through the air and causing the sky to crack and shatter. The Soul Overlord could not resist at all. When he tried to block the attack, his arms were chopped to pieces. Damn it! Why is there such a human sword immortal on this ordinary planet? The Soul Overlord roared. He wanted to escape into the black hole. Wushuang's killing intent surged, and he was fearless. He displayed the 7 emotions sword path, and one beam of sword energy after another cut through the void. He flew straight toward the black hole. As for himself, he also stepped forward and charged into the black hole. You're courting death. How dare you step into the soul demon black hole? The Soul Overlord fled into the black hole. His body was chopped to pieces, leaving only his true form to flee. However, he did not expect that Wushuang would dare to chase after him. The Soul Demon Black Hole was connected to the Soul Demon universe. Is this human an idiot? Rumble! As soon as Wushuang stepped into the black hole, he slashed out with his sword. The Soul Overlord's body was chopped to pieces. However, he also felt that something was wrong and he frowned slightly. The surrounding darkness was pressing down on him from all directions. It was as if he was stuck in a swamp. It was a very uncomfortable feeling. But why should he be afraid? As a saint of the sword path, he should move forward with an indomitable will. Everything should be broken with a sword. On the planet, Bufang clasped his hands behind his back and looked up at the same time as Xiao Bai. Looking at Wushuang, who had stepped into the black hole, the corner of his mouth twitched. That boy is really not afraid of death. He shook his head. Although Wushuang's sword path had become a saint, he was just a saint of the Great Path. Any great soul overlord could probably kill him. It was not easy to become a soul god in the soul demon universe, and it was not easy to become a perfected soul god. However, it was definitely very easy to become a great soul overlord. The sinful power of the soul demon universe was bound to give birth to a great soul overlord. Xiao Bai, let's go and clean up the mess for Wushuang. At the same time, we can find some soul overlord ingredient. It's been a long time since I've had a soul overlord cook. I wonder if his skills are rusty, Bufang said lightly. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flashed with a golden light. Rumble! The pressure in the black hole grew stronger and stronger. Wushuang focused his eyes. He took a step forward. Then, he charged out of the black hole and rushed into the starry sky. This part of the starry sky was deathly silent. Looking around, there were shattered stars and ruins everywhere. Black meatballs were clinging to them. The air was filled with the sinful power that disgusted him to the extreme. In the void, he could not extract any dermic powers. Damn it, where am I? Wushuang's face flickered. Because His Excellency was here, he was unscrupulous. However, it seemed that he had gone too far in showing off. In the distance, the soul demon's true form, which had been cut into pieces, was hovering in midair. Reckless human! Do you know where you are? The soul overlord hovered in the starry sky. Soon, the balls of flesh attached to the stars exploded and turned into energy that swept towards his body, forming a physical body. The soul overlord had returned to his original appearance. Wushuang's heart skipped a beat. Could it be Rumble? In the distance, the auras of one soul overlord after another erupted. These soul overlords were the top soul overlords who had become soul overlords in other universes and returned to the soul demon universe. At this moment, they were piling up one by one. Wushuang felt great pressure. He was not afraid of one soul overlord, 2 soul overlords, 3 soul overlords, and 4 soul overlords. However, if there were too many of them, he might be killed. Buzz, the soul overlords fixed their cold eyes on him. Wushuang's heart skipped a beat. But what's there to be afraid of? Although he cultivated the 7 emotions sword path, as a sword immortal, he naturally had an indomitable spirit. With a sword in hand, the world bows to me. Wushuang laughed heroically. Wushuang took a step forward and slashed his sword forward. His magic power boiled, and countless streams of sword energy gathered. Then, a huge sword energy that stretched across the void slashed out. This gigantic sword chi was formed by the convergence of countless smaller sword chi, and it contained an extremely terrifying killing power. This kind of power was unparalleled. The few soul overlords were forced back by his sword. He's so strong. The soul overlords were not afraid. Instead, they looked pleasantly surprised. In the soul demon universe, they were fearless. But this human sword immortal was alone. Could he really turn the world upside down? Unless that terrible chef from 1,000 years ago came. Otherwise, what were they afraid of? In the soul demon universe, there was a huge black planet floating in the sky. Flowing over it was the extremely terrible power of sin. The buildings on the planet were made of sharp, hideous black stones, and they rose into the sky one after another. The planet's surface was covered with black meatballs, each of which seemed to be breathing in and out. The power of sin was pouring out of them. Rumble! A supreme existence opened his eyes. His huge eyeballs rolled. Then, Wushuang's figure was reflected in them. Courting death, human. How dare you attack the soul demon universe? Die. Rumble! The planet trembled as the great soul overlord soared into the sky. Wushuang sensed the aura. His expression flickered. Damn it! He's so strong. He sucked in a cold breath. He had a bad feeling. He turned and wanted to go back through the black hole. However, the black hole began to slowly heal. Oh! Wushuang's expression changed. If he was really left here, when his magic power recovered, he would probably die. Suddenly Wushuang paused. Just as the black hole was about to heal, two figures emerged from it. Bufang and Xiao Bai walked slowly out. "Your Excellency!" Wushuang's eyes lit up in surprise. The next moment, he felt full of confidence. Chapter 1829. Wushuang did not expect Bufang to step out of the black hole. Now, he was not afraid at all. His heart, which had swelled up because he had killed a soul overlord, became even more swollen. With His Excellency here, what should I be afraid of? His Excellency is my strongest support. Wushuang was in high spirits. His eyes suddenly became extremely sharp. With the iron sword in his hand, his aura became more and more turbulent. With a long roar, the sword moved like a dragon. In the distance, the next moment, several soul overlords and countless soul demons swarmed toward them. Wushuang slashed out with his sword. A terrible aura gathered into a sword and fell from the sky. Countless soul demons were turned into ashes by his sword. His sword was very strong. After reaching the level of a peak saint of the Great Path, his sword intent had become more and more profound. Even though he was now in the soul demon universe, even though he was extracting energy from the void, he was fearless. He had a sword, and he would destroy heaven and earth. The few soul overlords flew over and collided with Wushuang's sword. The collision broke out in midair. Several soul overlords were fighting Wushuang back and forth with him. Bufang and Whitey stepped out of the void, looking indifferently at the scene before them. The soul demon universe, Bufang raised his hand and waved it slightly in the starry sky. He let out a sigh. This part of the universe had decayed to the extreme, completely ruined by the soul demon's corrosion. Back then, before the soul demons multiplied, this universe should have been very peaceful. Bufang shook his head and clasped his hands behind his back. He looked indifferently at Wushuang. Wushuang's sword was extremely steady, and every swing seemed to cause the void to explode. Bufang walked out unhurriedly, stepping between heaven and earth. One soul overlord, two soul overlords, more and more soul overlords joined the battle. Wushuang gradually felt that he could not hold on any longer. Rumble! In the depths of the soul demon universe, an extremely terrible aura erupted. The monstrous power of sin seemed to have turned into a dragon, rolling over from the distance and rushing toward Wushuang. Wushuang's expression flickered. This sinful energy was much stronger than that of an ordinary soul lord. Great soul overlord! Wushuang let out a long roar. The seven emotions swordsmanship erupted, and seven sword lights soared into the sky, constantly circulating in the sky. In the end, it turned into a sword that stretched across the universe and collided with the great soul overlord's attack. Boom! A terrifying explosion swept through the heavens and earth, and turbulent airwaves blotted out the sky. Bufang raised his eyebrows slightly. Wushuang took a few steps back in midair before he could stabilize himself. He felt his qi and blood floating. So strong, a great soul overlord was equivalent to a chaotic saint, and he was not weak. It was Wushuang's first time fighting a chaotic saint, and he felt a little overwhelmed. When he used that sword just now, his magic power was greatly depleted. Rumble! An oppressive aura filled the air, as if a great demon had crossed the void and arrived. It landed in front of Wushuang, and a terrible fluctuation kept spreading out, as if to devour him completely. This is the first time a foolish human dared to set foot in the soul demon universe, a hoarse voice rang out. The next moment, a huge demon floated over from the void. Soul demons were flying all over the sky, piling up into an extremely terrible fluctuation. This was really a great soul overlord. Wushuang felt the pressure on him was tremendous. 7 soul overlords and a great soul overlord. If it were not for Bufang, he might have been defeated long ago. However, at the thought that he still had Bufang's support, Wushuang felt full of fighting spirit. Holding the sword in his hand, he charged forward again. The sword light flickered. It was extremely dazzling in the universe, like a brilliant firework. "You're courting death." The great soul overlord smiled faintly, revealing his sharp teeth. He was a newly promoted great soul overlord. He was in a situation where his ego was inflated, and now, a human had come to his death as a tonic for him. Boom! A palm shot out horizontally. This palm was even bigger than a star. The sinful power swirling around it was so strong that it seemed to be dripping water. Wushuang's sword energy kept slashing at it, but it failed to destroy the sinful power. His expression gradually changed. Soon, he was struck by the great soul overlord's move, knocked flying backward and smashed into the void. "Your Excellency, I'm not strong enough." Wushuang clutched his chest with one hand, his face dark. "That's normal. If you had cultivated for a few more years, you might still have a chance. But you've just broken through, and you're still not strong enough to fight a great soul overlord." Bufang clasped his hands behind his back and said indifferently. In midair, many soul demons turned their eyes and fixed on Bufang. They saw Bufang, but they could not sense Bufang's aura. They thought Bufang was just an ordinary human cultivator. Of course, they could not associate Bufang with the chef who sealed the soul god 1,000 years ago. After 1,000 years, Bufang's aura had changed dramatically. And these soul demons were no longer the soul demons of the past. Rumble. A suppressed voice rang out. A soul overlord had struck. "Kill him while he's weak." These soul overlords knew this very well, so when Wushuang's aura was fluctuating, they struck quickly, intending to subdue him with one move. Wushuang raised his aura, trying to fight back. However, Bufang put a hand on her shoulder. "It's rare for me to come to the soul demon universe. Let's have some fun." Bufang said, "Consider it a trial." That gave Wushuang pause. Next to Bufang, Xiao Bai's golden mechanical eyes lit up. "Xiao Bai, show me your real skills," Bufang said. As soon as his voice rang out, Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes burst into golden light. Then, he raised his arm. His huge palm shrank and turned into a huge cannon. Golden light began to gather in it. Rumble! As the soul overlord approached, golden light burst out of the cannon. In a flash, the golden light engulfed the soul overlord, bombarding him and his true form. "Damn it!" Wushuang's jaw dropped. Even the soul overlord in the distance was shocked. The great soul overlord narrowed his eyes in disbelief. "I can't believe he killed a soul overlord with just one shot. The soul overlord is defenseless? How is this possible?" Wushuang was so shocked that he could not close his mouth. "I didn't know Xiao Bai is so strong." He had always thought that Xiao Bai was just guarding Bufang, stripping his clothes and acting cute at most. Acting cute, my ass. I can't believe this lump of iron is so strong. His fighting prowess is off the charts. That cannon, it directly blew a soul overlord into pieces. Wushuang's spirits rose. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flashed. He glanced around and rested his eyes on the few soul overlords. The pressure on those soul overlords increased dramatically. Then, all kinds of powerful soul demon skills were unleashed. However, Whitey raised both of its arms, which had turned into cannons. Boom! 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 Beams of golden light as thick as arms shot out. Every soul demon was hit by the attack. They were completely blown to ashes. Even if some managed to dodge, half of their bodies were smashed. It was simply terrible. Wushuang compared himself to Xiao Bai and found that, if he were to face him, he might not even be able to withstand one shot. Bufang nodded with satisfaction. Sure enough, Xiao Bai was different after upgrading his configuration. His fighting prowess was much stronger than before. Now, Xiao Bai should not be weaker than a perfected chaotic saint. And this was when he did not use his full power. He wondered how strong Xiao Bai would be if he used his full power. Perhaps he could look forward to it a little. "Xiao Bai, get me a piece of soul overlord meat," Bufang said. As soon as he finished speaking, Xiao Bai nodded. Then golden light burst out of his body, and he rushed out like a bolt of lightning. Then, he rushed toward the huge Great Soul Overlord in midair. Roar! The Great Soul Overlord roared. He raised a huge claw and smashed it toward Xiao Bai. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flashed. A beam of golden energy converged, turned into a sharp knife and slashed down. A slashing sound rang out. The Great Soul Overlord's claw was cut off. Countless wisps of black sinful power spread from it. The Great Soul Overlord's palm fell off and was slapped away by Xiao Bai. It sped toward Bufang's location at full speed. The palm was so huge that it looked like a star. Wu Shuang, cut him, Bufang said. Wu Shuang paused, then quickly grabbed his sword and soared into the sky. At Bufang's order, he slashed his sword again and again. Countless beams of sword energy shot out and tore the sky apart. Soon, the giant palm was constantly being torn apart by the sword chi. The Soul Overlord meat kept falling. The planet-sized Great Soul Overlord's palm was slowly shrinking. Finally, only 2 palm-sized chunks of meat were left. And this was exactly what Bufang needed. Wu Shuang was so tired that he was panting. He did not know that his sword could be used like this. It was a pity that he was not a chef. Bufang held the 2 chunks of meat and looked at them indifferently. The Soul Overlord meat was not fat like pork, but more like octopus and squid. Xiao Bai was fighting in the distance. Bufang began to process the 2 chunks of meat unhurriedly. Bufang raised his hand. Golden flames burst out of his palm and began to roast the meat. In the distance, the Great Soul Overlord's eyes widened. How could his palm be cut off? Damn chef! I can't believe it's a chef! The Great Soul Overlord roared. He never thought that it would be a chef who broke into the Soul Demon universe. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flashed as he fought the Great Soul Overlord again. The Great Soul Overlord was afraid that his palm would be cut off again. He kept being forced to retreat. Finally, the Great Soul Overlord was scared. Terrified, he teleported into the void and fled. He could not stay in this area any longer. After the Great Soul Overlord fled, Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flashed as he returned to Bufang's side. The aroma of roasted meat spread. A rich aroma wafted through the void. The faces of countless soul demons changed dramatically when they smelled it. Some of them exploded. Wu Shuang was shocked. It's just a fragrance. How could it restrain soul demons so much? Of course, those soul demons who exploded were just small fries. Bufang cut open the Great Soul Overlord meat and gave Wu Shuang a piece. Wu Shuang stuffed it into his mouth. Immediately, his mouth was filled with a rich aroma, which made it very slow for him to chew. It's delicious. Wu Shuang's eyes lit up with excitement. At this moment, his depleted magic power had all returned to him. He's indeed His Excellency. With His Excellency as his backing, I can keep killing soul demons. I no longer have to worry about running out of magic power. Xiao Bai also took a piece of meat, stuffed it into the mechanical mouth, and began to chew. Bufang savored it leisurely, feeling the texture of the meat slowly seeping into his heart. He felt like he was eating a dragonfish, but it was softer and more tender. Soul demons, they really deserve to be top-grade ingredient. The Soul Demon universe is really a good place. For some reason, Bufang was looking forward to it. He looked up. At a glance, he seemed to see the end of the Soul Demon universe. He seemed to see many ingredients waving at him. Chapter 1830. Wu Shuang had a good time eating. He did not expect that soul demons could be so delicious. Didn't that mean that everyone in the Soul Demon universe was a walking food ingredient? The meat quality of ordinary soul demons is not good, unless they are soul overlords. Otherwise, the taste of ordinary soul demons is very bad. Bufang explained to Wu Shuang. Wu Shuang was taken aback. There was actually such a saying? In other words, Xiao Bai had destroyed a lot of ingredients with one blast, and those were all delicious. Looking at Xiao Bai eating happily, Wu Shuang felt a pang in his heart. This big guy probably doesn't realize how much delicious food he has missed. Without soul overlords and great soul overlords, Wu Shuang was invincible. In his eyes, countless soul demons were nothing more than a sword strike. His swordsmanship also became more and more mature in this battle. The three of them slowly walked towards the void in the distance. The gigantic star was ferocious and terrifying. This star was the base of a great soul overlord, and each of them occupied a star. The great soul overlord, who had been beaten away just now, gave up on this star and fled to another. Bufang, Wu Shuang, and Xiao Bai landed. It landed on the star. This star was filled with blackened human bones. They were piled up to the brim, and there were even small mountains made of skulls. Damn soul demons! Wu Shuang's eyes narrowed, and when he saw this scene, he held his breath. With so many corpses, how many humans must have died? There were black balls of flesh clinging to the bones, and as they breathed in and out, they flickered with light. With a cold look in his eyes, Wu Shuang slashed down with a sword beam that turned into thousands of streams of light and flew away. Countless black meatballs were chopped into pieces by this sword energy. Bufang looked at the entire planet, as if he could feel the unwillingness and unyielding spirit hovering between heaven and earth. He exhaled. Bufang strode forward. The whole planet had been demonized by soul demons. Originally, this universe should have been filled with cultivators like the primordial universe. Unfortunately, the cultivators were defeated in the battle against the soul demons and ended up in this state. Sir, what can we do? Wu Shuang felt a little uncomfortable. As a sword immortal, he was a straightforward person and could not bear to see such a scene. There's nothing we can do. If it's possible, let's give this planet some hope. Bufang said lightly. The next moment, he took out the ingredients one by one. Wu Shuang was taken aback, and the look on his face turned slightly respectful and reverent. He took a step back and looked at Bufang from afar. Bufang lit the fire. The fire raged, and the ingredients were taken out one by one. The kitchen knife began to process them in an orderly manner. He cooked quietly. With the completion of the dish, there seemed to be a rich aroma beginning to fill the air. Rumble, the mountains collapsed and the earth cracked. The pitch-black building began to crumble. Countless bones melted and fused into the stars. The dish took shape. The sinful aura brought by the soul demon dissipated. A dense fragrance and dense spiritual energy lingered in the star. Bufang placed the simple dish on the ground. Bufang took a step back. Xiao Bai stood at his side, and Wu Shuang looked at him respectfully. Like a seed, the dish fell on the surface of the star and drove away the darkness. Beams of light spread out from the dish, constantly surging through the entire star, like a clear spring, washing away the sins on the star. Wu Shuang felt like he was in a dream. He opened his mouth wide and felt a gust of wind pouring into his mouth. Is this feeling the so-called hope? In Wu Shuang's eyes, the dead and broken star was washed by the dish, and thousands of lights and shadows emerged over it. It was as if he could see the peace of this star millions of years ago, and he could see the primitive villages on it at sunrise. This is incredible! Wu Shuang was horrified. Is this the restoration of the star from millions of years ago? To him, this kind of means was like a divine skill. Perhaps this is the real god of cooking. The scene changed for a long time. Finally, it disappeared. The gloominess of the stars disappeared. In the pitch-black land, the sky was dark. A tender shoot broke through the ground, carrying the unyielding will of life and the desire for the future. The aura of life returned to the star. Bufang clasped his hands behind his back. He looked at Wu Shuang with relief. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flashed as if he was sincerely happy. Wu Shuang's eyes were wet. The feeling of struggling for life made him want to throw his head back and roar. Perhaps coming to the soul demon universe is not a bad thing. We can rebuild this universe. We can transform this universe, Bufang said. Wu Shuang nodded. This is a kind of merit, he thought to himself. Bufang rose into the sky. Then, he drew a line in the void with his hand. An array enveloped the newborn planet to protect it from the soul demon's invasion. As for them, they took a step forward and headed to the next star. Rumble! The soul demon universe was boiling. A chef has invaded the soul demon universe? And he has even occupied a great soul overlord star. The 7 great sins soul overlords gathered together. An army of countless soul demons had assembled. Monstrous black smoke poured out of them, plunging the soul demon universe into darkness. Ancient star beasts, numbered soul demons, soul overlords, and great soul overlords had all gathered. They swept across the void. It had been tens of thousands of years since the soul demon universe had seen such a mighty force. The 7 great soul overlords gathered in midair. When the soul god is about to break the seal, a chef dares to invade our soul demon universe. Kill him! Roared one of the great soul overlords. The next moment, countless soul demons roared. Their bodies tore through the starry sky and sped toward Wushuang. On a distant star. The dark clouds on this pitch-black star began to slowly disperse. The sinful energy melted like snow, and the darkness began to return to light. A drizzle fell and began to wash away the remaining sins on the star. Tender green seeds sprouted. Another planet with life has returned. Bufang looked at the ordinary-looking dish on the ground and said lightly. Then, he soared into the sky with Xiao Bai and Wushuang. They walked through the starry sky. Oh! In the distance, the army of soul demons was approaching. Wushuang's eyes blazed. Your Excellency! It's the soul demons. Wushuang was not surprised. When Bufang let that great soul overlord go, he knew that His Excellency was going to do something big. So he had been looking forward to this moment. Now all these soul demons had gathered. There were dozens of soul overlords and 7 great soul overlord. He could not believe that the soul demons had recovered to such a level in just 1,000 years. Perhaps the strength of the 7 great soul overlords was weaker than that of the previous great soul overlords. However, one of them was the strongest great soul overlord. Sure enough, the soul demons really multiplied fast. No wonder they could become a terrible disaster that swept across the universe. Kill them! Without hesitation, Wushuang charged out. With Bufang by his side, he did not need to worry about the lack of magic power. So, he could kill to his heart's content. However, he was only a saint of the Great Path, after all. Facing dozens of soul overlords, he was soon defeated. Wushuang returned in a sorry state, his face slightly unsightly. Lord Bai, you go. I'll support you, Wushuang said. Remember to leave a piece of meat for me, Buzz. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flashed. Then, he soared into the sky and charged toward the army. Golden light burst out of Xiao Bai's body. The next moment, it bloomed. Colorful and dazzling, it spread out in all directions. In the blink of an eye, countless soul demons in the surroundings were reduced to ashes. How strong is Xiao Bai now? I really can't tell. Wushuang sucked in a cold breath. If he were to face Lord Bai, he would probably be killed in an instant. Even when dozens of soul overlords attacked, Xiao Bai was not afraid at all. One slap at a time, Xiao Bai skinned them first. Whitey skinned them as easily as stripping clothes. Bam! 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 In midair, one soul overlord after another was annihilated. Pieces of meat flew toward Wushuang, and he felt refreshed as he collected them. Rumble! The great soul overlords attacked at the same time. 6 great soul overlords attacked at the same time, which caused Xiao Bai's indomitable momentum to stagnate slightly. In the distance, the strongest great soul overlord locked onto Bufang. When he saw Bufang, his pupils constricted slightly. It's this chef? The strongest great soul overlord sucked in a cold breath. When he was not the strongest great soul overlord, he had seen that unparalleled battle from a distance. That battle, the invincible soul god was suppressed by a chef. That chef looked exactly like this chef in front of him. This chef has returned? The great soul overlord's hair stood on end. The next moment, without hesitation, he abandoned Xiao Bai and went straight toward Bufang. He wanted to kill Bufang at any cost. Otherwise, it would be bad if Soul God came out and was suppressed again. The strongest great soul overlord charged at him. In the distance, Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flashed. Buzz, the golden knife swept across. The bodies of several great soul overlords exploded in an instant. The strongest great soul overlord charged at him. Suddenly, as he approached Bufang, he could not move forward at all. He was grabbed by a palm that looked like a cattail leaf fan. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flashed as he threw a punch and punched the great soul overlord. Rumble! The great soul overlord was stunned. A great battle was about to break out. Xiao Bai's fighting prowess was truly terrifying. Bufang ignored him. With Wushuang in tow, he landed on a planet. He took out cooking ingredients and placed them on the planet. The sin receded like a tide. Everything seemed to have returned to peace. Life was struggling tenaciously. It was like planting a seed and waiting for the next year's harvest. Every planet, every dish in the starry sky, the scene was completely different. Xiao Bai was fighting against many great soul overlords and great soul overlords. On the other side, Bufang and Wushuang were cooking leisurely again, washing away the sins of the planet. Finally, dozens of planets had been washed away by Bufang's sins. The recovery of these planets would affect the other planets, washing away the sins of the smaller planets as well. Bufang raised his hand. He pushed out a dish, which immediately floated in the starry sky. It shone brilliantly like the sun. The darkness receded. Bufang looked ahead. There was also a huge star floating quietly in the sky. The sin on it was so thick that it was like a churning river. This was Soul God's lair, the planet that belonged to him. Bufang took Wushuang and stepped into it with an indomitable spirit. Before long, the sin on the planet dissipated, and the rain began to fall. A dish was placed quietly on the ground. It made everything peaceful. Perhaps one day, when Soul God returns and sees the whole universe filled with delicious dishes, he will cry in anger. The corner of Wushuang's mouth twitched. He had learned from Bufang that Soul God hated his dishes. And now, his lordship seemed to be doing something very black-bellied. The spiritual energy in the soul demon universe gradually became stronger. Wushuang felt that he could extract magic power from it. Excited, he joined the battle in the starry sky. Bufang stood in the boundless starry sky with his hands clasped behind his back. Looking at the many planets that seemed to have changed, the corners of his mouth lifted slightly. He raised his hand. Then, he snapped his fingers. Pada! On many planets, bright flowers were quietly blooming. The soul demon's base camp, which symbolized sin, was filled with flowers. Chapter 1831. The seed I planted has finally borne fruit. Tomorrow is a great day. Bufang was very satisfied with his masterpiece. Looking at the soul demon universe and the blooming stars, he could not help but hum a little song. Humming was a hobby that Bufang had accidentally developed when he returned to the mortal world. Although he did not sing well, he did not hum for anyone. He just wanted to make himself happy. In the distance, many soul overlords widened their eyes. What the hell did this damn chef do? He actually planted flowers all over the soul demon universe? This is a blatant attempt to throw the dignity of the soul demon universe to the ground and trample on it. They were soul demons, the supreme soul demons. How could they be insulted by someone? How angry! The strongest soul overlord roared. His body suddenly unleashed a terrifying energy that knocked Xiao Bai flying backward. The latter was somewhat dumbfounded. He rubbed his hands in midair, his mechanical eyes flashing. Xiao Bai did not seem to be at a disadvantage, even though he was fighting so many enemies alone, which frightened these soul overlords. Damn chef! You sealed His Excellency Soul God, and now you've come to our soul demon universe to attack us. You really have an irreconcilable feud with us soul demons. The strongest soul overlord roared. For a moment, his aura exploded to the extreme. He broke free from Xiao Bai and sped toward Bufang. A few stars were hit by him and exploded, but the great soul overlord did not seem to care at all. There was only Bufang in his ferocious eyes. He wanted to tear Bufang to pieces. Die! The strongest soul overlord roared. Wu Shuang's expression flickered. He let out a long roar. I grabbed the iron sword, grabbed it, and slashed it at the strongest soul overlord. Boom! However, the strongest soul overlord was too strong. Wu Shuang felt that he was about to be annihilated in an instant. Before his sword energy could even get close to the great soul overlord, it completely collapsed. That kind of pressure was really too strong. He felt a tightness in his chest, and he almost coughed up a mouthful of blood. It was so unbearable that his flesh was about to collapse. However, this feeling did not last long. Bufang moved. He did not know when Bufang had appeared behind him. She raised her hand and placed her palm on his shoulder. That terrifying sense of oppression dissipated with the wind. This feeling was really magical. Wu Shuang looked at Bufang in surprise. It turns out that his lordship is so strong. Bufang glanced at Wu Shuang, but he did not say anything. Although this strongest Great Soul Overlord was slightly weaker than Sloth Great Soul Overlord in the past, he was still a formidable Great Soul Overlord. However, at the very least, he was the strongest expert in the Soul Demon universe. Bufang did not underestimate his opponent. He flipped his hand. Suddenly, a dish appeared on his palm. The aroma of the dish lingered in the air, and it carried a strange fluctuation of chaotic energy. Wu Shuang's pupils constricted slightly. What is that? Chaos pot. I want to know more about it. Bufang said lightly. With a flick of his finger, the chaos pot flew out and turned into a streak of light that instantly shot forward. Its speed was very fast, and in the blink of an eye, it was closing in on the strongest soul overlord. 1,000 years ago, the chaos pot was Bufang's trump card. Now that 1,000 years had passed, Bufang had gone through the mortal return, the test of the god of cooking, and the trial of the emotional path. The chaos pot had also changed. It was a simple pot, but it contained great terror. The strongest soul overlord did not pay any attention to the pot that was flying toward him. He opened his mouth and let out a roar. The roar was so powerful that it was going to blow the chaos pot away. Unfortunately, the moment he opened his mouth, not only was the chaos pot not blown away, but it even went straight into his mouth. The strongest soul overlord froze. Clutching his neck, he let out a terrified roar. Bufang took Wu Shuang with him and teleported away. In a flash, they appeared on a planet full of blooming flowers. Your lordship, Wu Shuang opened his mouth. Shu, be quiet. Watch the fireworks, Bufang said lightly. In midair, Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flashed as he stared at the struggling strongest soul overlord. Boom! An explosion rang out. The strongest soul overlord's body began to crumble and explode. The dazzling explosion swept across the starry sky in a flash, and the sky kept getting brighter and brighter. Wu Shuang stared blankly at it. Under the illumination of the light, the dark starry sky seemed to burst into colorful lights. The beautiful scene, which looked like an aurora, made Wu Shuang's heart skip a beat. Holding his sword, he looked up at the starry sky, his heart calm. Turns out that his lordship is so strong. The great soul overlords were horrified. The strongest soul overlord was killed just like that? Rumble! A huge chunk of great soul overlord meat fell from the void at an incredible speed. The soul overlord meat was still wrapped in a shell. It smashed into the star. Bufang walked over unhurriedly, tore open the shell, and collected the tender meat. These are all top-notch ingredients in the universe. Although a true god of cooking can cook extremely delicious dishes with ordinary ingredients, if he can use top-notch ingredients, the delicious taste will be endless. Bufang said. Wushuang watched as Bufang rolled up his sleeves and busied himself collecting the Soul Overlord meat in the ruins. In the sky, with the defeat of the strongest Soul Overlord, Xiao Bai began the cleanup operation. A beam of golden light seemed to reach into the depths of the universe. Every time it swept across the sky, it blew up a great Soul Overlord. One by one, the great Soul Overlords exploded in midair. Of course, some soul demons chose to flee from the Soul Demon universe. The Soul Demon's lair was no longer safe, because a few bullies had appeared. The Soul Demons summoned spatial passages, crawled into them, and disappeared. A few seriously injured great Soul Overlords also fled. But more. They were captured by Xiao Bai. One Soul Overlord after another exploded in midair, blooming like fireworks. As for the other weaker soul demons, Xiao Bai did not kill them. Instead, he locked them up and left them to Bufang. Xiao Bai landed. His body was emitting hot steam, and his mechanical eyes were flashing with excitement. He was very excited about the battle. When Xiao Bai returned, Bufang had finished collecting the ingredient. He rolled up his sleeves and came over. "Is it over?" Bufang asked. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flashed as he nodded. The corners of Bufang's mouth lifted slightly as he looked into the distance. There, countless soul demons were flying in the starry sky. These were all ordinary soul demons. Xiao Bai left them to Bufang. In fact, it was easy for Xiao Bai to slaughter them. It was just a matter of firing a cannon. Bufang patted Xiao Bai's belly. "It's okay. I'll clean it up." Bufang glanced at the soul demons in the starry sky. The next moment, he took out a kitchen knife, a black wok, and a stove, and began to cook. Before long, a dish was ready. In the face of thousands of soul demons in the starry sky, Bufang had locked them up in a small, broken planet. A dish fell from the sky. It floated over the planet. The aroma of the dish fell like a waterfall, locking up all the soul demons. It was basically impossible for these soul demons to break out of the dish's blockade. They could only be imprisoned on this planet. Without humans, these soul demons could not evolve. Without enough strength, they could not break out of the dish's blockade. Perhaps this was the best ending for these soul demons. As the dish rotated instead, the sinful energy in these soul demons was constantly purified by the dish, turning it into the purest energy that flowed in the universe and provided the energy source for the lives in the universe. Wushuang looked respectfully at Bufang. Perhaps it was better to use them this way than to kill these soul demons. He's worthy of being my lord. With the energy source provided by these soul demons, in the near future this universe might regain its prosperity and stability, and new life might be born again. The soul demons destroyed and devoured lives, but in the end, they became the energy source for new life. This was a wonderful move. The soul demon universe used to be a prosperous universe, Bufang said. This can be considered a reincarnation. Bufang shook his head. In fact, there was a complicated look in his eyes. He let out a sigh. To him, this might be redemption. In the primitive universe, in the ninth heaven of the celestial court, many immortals and deities lined up in rows to welcome the arrival of many almighty experts. The immortal peach banquet was being held today. Yang Jian, clad in armor and holding a three-pointed, double-edged knife, was in charge of guarding the banquet. Almighty experts from the chaotic universe, the primitive universe, and Void City had received invitations to attend the banquet. This time, the immortal peach banquet was the grandest one held in tens of millions of years. It was no longer limited to the primitive, immortal world. It included experts from the primitive universe and other universes. Therefore, he did not dare to be careless. The Celestial Emperor was very concerned about this banquet. Rumble in the distance, a terrifying aura started to spread out. A Buddha that blotted out the sky flew over. His body shrunk and turned into an amiable Buddha with a small bell hanging on his neck. He chanted the name of Buddha, followed by many Buddhas and Arhats as they stepped into the heavenly gate of the immortal court. "Welcome, Lord Buddha." Yang Jian hurriedly cupped his fists and said. The Buddha smiled, nodded at Yang Jian, and stepped into the heavenly gate. A sharp sword light shot out. As Tong Tian descended, his sharp aura caused the void to be torn. "Welcome, sect leader." Yang Jian bowed respectfully again. The celestial hound lay on the ground, not daring to move. These were all the top, almighty experts of the primitive universe. Behind him were tens of thousands of immortals. The banquet this time was really grand. The arrival of goddess Nuwa, Yuanshi Tianzuan, and other experts made the banquet more grand than ever. And this was just the beginning. Outside the heavenly gate, a black dog walked slowly toward them, strutting its cat-like step. As soon as it appeared, the flow of time around it seemed to slow down. Heaven God time of the chaotic universe. Yang Jian's pupils constricted. Now that Heaven God time had stepped into the level of a perfected chaotic saint, Tong Tian had gone to celebrate. Yang Jian naturally needed to be respectful. These were the top experts of other universes. Yang Jian did not dare to be careless. Heaven God time of the chaotic universe has arrived. The immortal in charge of the ceremony shouted hoarsely, his voice echoing through the celestial court. After that, Nether King Ha held a beautiful woman in his arms as he walked through the air. A golden mantis shrimp. A fox as white as snow. The top experts of the chaotic universe arrived one after another. Except for the chaotic universe, the experts of Void City also arrived in batches. Duchess Yunlan, Duchess Nightmare, and Duchess Tianlian came through the air. The top experts of Void City had arrived in the celestial court. The terrible aura in the celestial court almost stretched out into one. The arrival of so many experts was enough to shake heaven and earth. The immortals and deities of the celestial court did not even dare to breathe loudly. Meanwhile, in the celestial court's immortal palace, immortal mountains, flowing rivers, divine bridges, spirit pavilions, dense immortal energy drifted in the air. Female immortals dressed in silks and satins carried bamboo baskets with slender hands, which contained immortal fruits of the celestial court. Yuanshi Tianzuan, Tong Tian, and other top almighty experts of the primitive universe sat cross-legged on high seat. Even the immortal emperor could only sit at the side. In the guest seats were the black dog, the fox, and the mantis shrimp. There were also the graceful, dreamy, and pitiful women. This was a top feast. Yang Jian led the heavenly soldiers and sat cross-legged outside the starry sky gate. The vertical eye on his forehead burst into a dazzling light. Suddenly he paused. He looked into the distance. Over there, two figures walked slowly toward him. Two women? No, one was a man and the other was a woman. The man was as beautiful as a peerless beauty, eclipsing the woman beside him. There seemed to be music playing in the background as the man walked. Yang Jian's face furrowed. Chapter 1832. Two figures slowly approached from a distance. Yang Jian rose to his feet and raised his three-pointed, double-edged knife. Buzz, the two men moved so fast that they appeared in front of Yang Jian in a flash. Summer passed quietly, leaving behind a little secret. The background music gradually fell silent. Yang Jian had a strange look on his face. We were traveling around the universe and heard there was delicious food, so we came to have a look, the unbelievably beautiful man said with a smile. His smile made Yang Jian raise his eyebrows. I'm Mu Hongzi, from the chaotic universe. Mu Hongzi smiled. As if sensing Mu Hongzi's aura, the Lord Go opened his sleepy eyes slightly and sent a voice transmission to Yang Jian. Yang Jian was taken aback. After the Lord Go's introduction, he learned that Mu Hongzi was a chef like Bu Feng, and his cooking skills seemed to be pretty good. Nowadays, the primitive universe was very respectful to chef. Even the status of the Heaven Chief in the Celestial Court had risen a lot. "Ah, it's Chef Mu. I've heard a lot about you. I'm glad to meet you," Yang Jian said with a smile, putting away his knife. "How happy." Mu Hongzhi chuckled. Yang Jian was speechless. Were all chefs so naughty nowadays? Or was everyone in the chaotic universe normal? "Please come in." The corner of Yang Jian's mouth twitched. He stepped aside and let Mu Hongzhi enter. Yang Jian could sense that Mu Hongzhi's aura was very strong, so he was very polite. Summer nodded at Yang Jian, then dragged Mu Hongzhi, who wanted to say something naughty to Yang Jian, into the palace. Yang Jian looked over his shoulder and his eyes grew serious. Just as the Soul God was about to be born, these top chefs had all arrived. Sure enough, the sense of crisis was getting closer. If the Soul God rose, coupled with the Soul Demon Universe's 1,000 years of reproduction, it would have grown to a terrifying scale by now, and the various universes might not be able to stop it. Without the suppression of Bufang's food, it would be very difficult for humans to fight the Soul Demons. Yang Jian let out a breath, and a worried look appeared in his eyes. In the Immortal Palace, at the Immortal Peach Banquet, when Mu Hongzhi and Summer entered, the Immortal Emperor warmly welcomed them and specially opened a seat for Mu Hongzhi. The Lord Go said that Mu Hongzhi was a great cook, so the Immortal Emperor didn't dare to neglect him. After all, the chefs of the chaotic universe were all extraordinary. Just look at Bufang from back then. Mu Hongzhi was calm. Xia Xia thanked the Immortal Emperor and sat beside the Lord Go and the others. Her expression was a little complicated. She hadn't seen him for many years, and things were still the same, but people had changed. She also knew about Bufang's death. What happened in the Shui Divine Dynasty was still vivid in her mind. She never thought that Bufang would die. This made her feel rather emotional. The Lord Go nodded at Xiaji. Then, he gave Mu Hongzhi a serious look, his eyes grave. Now that Bufang was dead, perhaps only Mu Hongzhi could stop Soul God. This was also the reason why Lord Go summoned Mu Hongzhi, who was traveling in the universe. Mu Hongzhi seemed to know the seriousness of the matter, so he really came. The almighty experts did not say anything. The Feast of Peaches was going on. It was a rare event that the Celestial Court would hold every once in a while. And this time it was the largest one so far. Immortal music was playing as fairies arrived one after another. The immortal baskets were filled with fresh immortal peaches and swirling with immortal energy. The dishes cooked by the Heaven Chief were also brought out and placed on the table. The dishes were fragrant and the best wine was served. The banquet was quite peaceful. The Immortal Emperor was very satisfied. He stroked his long beard with a smile on his face. Tong Tian, Yuanshi Tianzuan, and the others were enjoying the delicious food. However, the food was tasteless when they put it into their mouth. They had something on their minds, so the delicious food could not stimulate their appetites. The Lord Go ate a peach and stopped. As picky as he was, it was difficult for him to eat other delicacies. Hades' Era, on the other hand, ate happily, and even teased the fairies from time to time. Mu Hongzhi was eating heartily. He stuffed his mouth with food, drank the wine, and ate the immortal peaches. As a chef, he did not seem to be picky at all. In this way, he was somewhat different from Bufang. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, he breathed a sigh of relief. At this time, it was finally time to get down to business. Rumble. The immortals grew solemn. Yuanshi Tianzuan spoke. 1,000 years have passed in the blink of an eye, and fate has ended with the snap of a finger, and the instant demon is born. It has been 1,000 years since the calamity of the Soul Demon. Now that Soul God is about to come out again, we need to work together to resist him. Many immortals and deities echoed his words. None of them dared to underestimate the apocalyptic disaster that Soul God would bring. The Dukes of Void City nodded. Soul God would not spare Void City or the chaotic universe. He would certainly retaliate against the places that had suppressed his body. They could not escape the karma. You are still striving for the Queen of Curses inheritance, and no one knows when she will complete it. After all, 1,000 years is too short. Lord Go did not say anything. He just lay there with his eyes closed. Little Hu and Xiaopi were playing with each other. Hades' era and the fairies were talking about life and ideals. Mu Hongzhi was still eating. Only Summer was listening attentively. If Soul God really comes out, we need to prepare a way out as soon as possible. Otherwise, we will be doomed eternally. Yuanshi Tianzuan said. His voice faded away. He waved his hand. A terrible aura swirled around him. In a flash, the scene between heaven and earth began to change rapidly. The immortal palace turned into a sky full of stars, swirling with starlight, which made the world look very strange. Yuanshi Tianzuan raised his hand and made a grabbing motion in the void. Then, the scene was abruptly pulled in. The endless stars turned into a river of stars, which flowed as if leading to a boundless world. The way out has been paved. If we are defeated, we can send all our hopes to the paved way. Perhaps in a few years, we can fight our way back into the universe. Yuanshi Tianzuan took a deep breath. His tone was calm, but there was a hint of solemnity in it. Many immortals and deities sighed, and some looked sad. Lord Go and the others did not say anything. In fact, all the experts present thought it was a feasible plan. No one rejected it, because they could not. As for where the end of the River of Stars was, many people knew that once they went there, it would be too difficult to fight their way back. The environment there was too difficult, and it was not friendly to immortals and deities. But if it really came to that, this might be the last resort, the only way to preserve the flame of the universe. The meeting went on for a long time. All the immortals and deities were very serious. Neither the chaotic universe nor Void City rejected the plan. After discussing the way out, they began to talk about Soul God. Yuanshi Tianzuan's hand shook again. The next moment, the scene changed. It was Hanggu Pass, which lay across the starry sky. Many immortals and deities had complicated looks in their eyes. In front of Hanggu Pass, there was a huge black ball. In it, a scarlet eyeball could be seen rolling. A dish was floating in the air. The arrays around the dish were corroded and crumbled by Soul God's power of the great sins. The arrays that had been laid out for 1,000 years could not stop Soul God's power at all. As for the dish, it was on the verge of disappearing. Mu Hongzhi finally stopped eating and drinking. He looked up at the dish with narrowed eyes. He took a deep breath. I can't believe that boy has touched that level, Mu Hongzhi said with emotion. He knew very well the level of the dish. It was a pseudo-god of cooking dish. Otherwise, it would not have been able to suppress Soul God. Of course, it was also because Soul God was not in his complete state that it could suppress him for 1,000 years. If Soul God was in his perfect state, even if it was a pseudo-god of cooking dish, it could only suppress him for 100 years at most. The difference between a pseudo-god of cooking dish and a pseudo-god of cooking dish was huge. Mu Hongzhi squinted at the dish, filled with emotion. However, to be able to cook such a dish, Bu Fang would not die so easily. The corner of Mu Hongzhi's mouth lifted slightly. Perhaps that boy is just pursuing the last step of the cooking path. No one can sense him at that level. He was not too pessimistic. He sat down again and continued to eat and drink. Of course, it was impossible for him to stop Soul God. After all, he had given up on the path of becoming a god of cooking. His cooking skills might have improved, but he was still a long way from cooking pseudo-god of cooking dishes, let alone stop Soul God. The discussion at the immortal banquet continued. Yuanshi Tianzuan proposed to gather the experts of the 3 universes to suppress Soul God. No one objected. Perhaps this was the only way for now. Of course, they could also wait until the new Queen of Void City was born. However, no one knew when the Queen would be born. The countdown to Soul God's birth had come. As long as the dish disappeared completely, the immortals' arrays would not be able to suppress him. At that time, it would be a catastrophe for the universes, and this time, it would be even more terrible than 1,000 years ago. The immortal banquet went on for a full day and night. Finally, many immortals and deities left. The almighty experts also returned to their respective universes. Without saying a word, Tong Tian returned to Hangu Pass on his flying sword and stayed in the starry sky. Meanwhile, Lord Go and the others returned to the chaotic universe. They began to make arrangements. The same was true for the Dukes of Void City. Mu Hongzhi came to Hangu Pass with Summer and looked at the black ball from a distance. He felt a suffocating aura coming at him. Soul God's fearsomeness really made people shudder. In fact, Mu Hongzhi could have walked the ruthless path. He had even touched the threshold, but he had given up. He wondered what path Bufang had taken. Could Bufang walk the ruthless path without any worries? Mu Hongzhi shook his head and took a deep breath. Rumble! Heaven and earth shook. A terrible aura spread in all directions. In Hangu Pass, Tong Tian opened his eyes. Controlling the 4 immortal swords, he stepped into the air and hovered over the black ball. Rumble! In the ball, the scarlet eyeball locked on to Tong Tian. A cold sneer began to spread. Inside the black ball, the dish on top of the dish was finally being devoured bit by bit. It was a pseudo-god of cooking dish. The mountain and river painting had suppressed Soul God for 1,000 years. Now it could not hold on any longer. Crack! The black smoke turned into numerous roaring black faces, rushing out in all directions and slamming into the array. Countless cracks spread across the array. A terrible aura began to seep out of it. The eyes of Yuanshi Tianzuan, Tong Tian, the Empress, and the Buddha all changed. They exerted their mighty power. Terrible energy surged through the universe and pressed down. Rumble! A huge storm began to sweep across the universe. Inside the black ball, it was as if a burly figure was faintly discernible, with a cold smile on his face. At Hangu Pass, the faces of the immortals and deities turned very unsightly. Summer's face was pale. Even Mu Hongzhi narrowed his eyes. The background music stopped. 1,000 years had passed. Soul God was about to come out. In the Soul Demon universe, in a brand new universe. Bufang stood on a planet with his hands clasped behind his back. Xiao Bai and Wu Shuang stood behind him, feeling the different world around them. Suddenly Bufang raised his eyebrows. So fast. It's been 1,000 years. The Soul God has come out. I wonder if he is satisfied with the transformation of the Soul Demon universe. I can't help but look forward to it. Chapter 1833. The Primitive Universe. They were waiting solemnly. Countless immortals and deities hovered in midair. Every immortal god's expression was extremely solemn. They could not help but be solemn. After all, it was a moment of life and death. In Hangu Pass, countless heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals stood on the city walls, weapons in hand. Immortal energy gathered above their heads as if thousands of strands of purple energy had gathered. They were immortals, but now they were warriors. Warriors who protected their homeland. The soul demons were invaders, and the soul god was a sinful plunderer. They needed to pour their blood into the walls and use their bodies to resist the soul demons, so that these invaders would be wiped out. They would protect everything they needed to protect with a will of steel. They were immortals, but they were also human beings with emotions and fear. But they knew that they could not retreat. Behind him was the boundless primordial world and millions of mortals of the primordial world. If they retreated, it would be a great calamity and massacre that would make heaven and earth weep. Dressed in a Taoist robe, Tong Tian stood at the forefront of the city walls, looking sharply at the starry sky in the distance, which was filled with dark energy. Sword will surged around his body. Any random sword will could shatter a star. It was extremely powerful. However, as strong as he was, he did not have the slightest confidence that he could deal with the soul god. Even though the Soul God was at his weakest after being suppressed for 1,000 years and breaking the seal, he did not have the slightest confidence either. But they had to give it a try. Only by trying would they have a chance. Not only Tong Tian, but Yuanshi Tianzuan, Lady Nuwa, the Buddha, and other top experts of the primitive universe had also appeared. They were all perfected chaotic saints. But they were not the only ones. In midair, Lord Go appeared with his enchanting cat-like step. His eyes were indifferent, and the law of time swirled around him. Hades' era, dressed in golden armor and holding a spicy strip between his lips, looked just like the high-spirited Hades he used to be. Xiaopi and Little who looked ordinary, but no one dared to underestimate them. After all, the modern-day heaven gods of the chaotic universe were all top experts, and Heaven God Time was a perfected chaotic saint. Duchess Yunlan, Duchess Nightmare, and Duchess Tianlian also appeared. Their auras fluctuated, and the cursed snake spat out a terrifying aura. At this moment, heaven and earth seemed to have turned dark. The appearance of so many experts gave the experts of the untainted universe a lot more confidence. Perhaps they had a chance to withstand this calamity. But Soul God was in existence at the level of an ancestral god, so they could not muster up any fighting spirit. Even the will of the primordial heavenly Tao could do nothing to him. So what? In the primordial universe, the heavenly Tao was supreme. The heavenly Tao was the manifestation of the ancestor god's will. It was truly supreme. Lord Go strode like a cat as he stared at the spinning black ball. He frowned. Soul God is so strong. Nether King Air Ha sucked in a breath of cold air. It was just a feeling. His aura was shaking, and the spicy strip in his mouth seemed to be shivering. Bufong boy died trying to seal this guy, Bufong said. The Lord Go said. His tone was very calm, but one could hear that there was a deep anger in it. Xiaopi and Little who were also hovering in midair. Bufong young man is really amazing. I can't even hold a spicy strip in my mouth. I can't believe Bufong young man could suppress him for 1,000 years. TSK, Tisk, Hades' era held the scepter of life and waved it slightly. In fact, it was this guy who smashed the chaos space with a palm. Let's settle old and new grudges together. The Lord Go said. As his voice rang out, the void behind them swept away. Many experts of the chaotic universe stepped out and hovered in the sky, facing the great heavenly Tao. The army of Void City, the army of the chaotic universe, and the army of the primitive universe. They all appeared. The huge ball of the great sins was surrounded by 3 different forces. A murderous aura rushed into the starry sky as if to scatter the starry river. The aura made the blood of countless experts boil. Fight. With the Qingping sword in his hand and the 4 immortal swords circling over his head, Tong Tian said in a faint voice. In Hanggu Pass, many immortals and deities let out deafening roars. Fight! 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 Their roars filled heaven and earth. It caused the void to explode. Suddenly cracks began to slowly appear on the black ball of the great sins. Crack with a clear sound, lines of runes appeared and spread over the black ball of great sins. Then, one of the scarlet eyeballs spun and appeared at the very front. Suddenly, a ferocious look burst out of it. Crack, the cracks on the ball of the great sins grew more and more obvious, one after another like a broken pearl. Rumble! A surging aura spewed out of the cracks and spread out in all directions in the starry sky. Everyone's hearts trembled as they fixed their eyes on it. Tong Tian took a step forward. His body floated in front of the black ball that was as huge as a vast star. In front of this ball, Tong Tian seemed to become very small. Crack! A clear cracking sound rang out. The ball exploded. Boom! All of a sudden, it exploded and countless fragments flew into the air. They were like broken glass. The flow of time seemed to have slowed down a lot, everything was flowing slowly. The broken fragments swept toward Tong Tian, and a terrible aura swept out. Tong Tian's eyes widened. He stood in the starry sky. His hair was fluttering in the wind, and his Taoist robe was also fluttering. That kind of fluttering looked somewhat heroic. Rumble, the broken fragments rushed toward him as if to cut him into thousands of pieces. Buzz, the Qingping sword fell into his hand. Tong Tian let out a long roar, and a vast sword intent surged out of him. Tens of thousands of small swords flew through the starry sky and collided violently with the shattered fragments. An explosion rang out in the starry sky. Flames enveloped the starry sky. Tong Tian flew out on his sword. The immortal sword array turned into the fiercest killing array as it shot toward the figure that emerged from the black ball. Tap, 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 however, everything seemed to have become very quiet. Only the sound of footsteps could be heard, as if they were walking slowly out of the corridor of time. The sound of footsteps echoed through the starry sky. It rang in everyone's heart. The aura of many immortals and deities rose and fell with the sound of footsteps. Their hearts seemed to be following the footstep. The sound of footsteps grew faster and faster. It was as if they were walking slowly, then sprinting, then running, and finally sprinting. Their hearts beat faster and faster. In the end it was so fast that they could not accept it. Bam! 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 Some immortals and deities' faces turned red. They could not help but cough up blood which was mixed with broken hearts. How terrible! How terrible! The experts of the chaotic universe, the immortals and deities of the primitive universe, the nobles of Void City, they were all shocked at this moment. This was the sole god, the most terrible existence who stood at the peak of the universe. Rumble! At last, a figure leaped out of the black ball of the great sins. His body streaked across the void. His figure was accompanied by a deafening laugh. 1,000 years. I've finally broken the seal. Soul demons, your god has returned. His long roar shook the whole universe. Tong Tian held the Qingping sword in his hand and focused his eyes. Now is the time. Kill. Sect leader Tong Tian's dermic powers flowed as he swung his sword and charged straight at the black figure who rushed out. The figure was just a blurry black figure. His face could not be seen clearly, but he had a pair of scarlet eyes. He was like a shadow, walking in the darkness. Goddess Nuwa moved. She threw out the 7-colored divine stone, which shone with a supreme divine light to assist Tong Tian. Yuanshi Tianzuan rolled up his sleeves, held the heaven-splitting axe, and strode toward the black figure. The Buddha chanted the name of Buddha. The bell spun rapidly. Countless Buddhas chanted the name of Buddha, which was accompanied by a supreme bell ringing. It pushed through the void. The Buddha leaped up and touched the top of the bell with the tip of his foot. The bell flew toward the black figure. Today, I will help you out of the sea of bitterness, the Buddha said mercifully. The 4 experts attacked at the same time, causing a great commotion. The black figure's laughter echoed between heaven and earth. His figure kept moving horizontally, and as he moved horizontally, his whereabouts became more and more elusive. He struck out with his palm and collided with the Qingping sword. Sparks flew everywhere. The immense force nearly shattered the Qingping sword. The immortal slaying sword formation was sent flying by a loud roar. The light from the 7-colored divine stone hit the black figure, but it was not damaged at all. He sneered. He punched out. It collided with that terrifying giant axe. Boom! The heaven-splitting axe was immediately pushed to the side. 4 perfected chaotic saints were fighting the soul god. This battle shook the world. The 3 dukes of Void City were only as strong as top chaotic saint. They could only watch and could not intervene in this kind of battle. Bam! Terrifying energy ripples spread out continuously. It caused the heavens and earth to tremble endlessly. Boom! The power of the great sins turned into numerous spears, which Soul God held in his hand. As he laughed, his body began to grow bigger and bigger. As his body grew larger, the spear was directly grabbed by him and swept out horizontally. The 4 perfected chaotic saints were forced to retreat with just one move, rumble. Above Hangu Pass, the sect leader of Tongtian held his sword and kept retreating. Every step he took left a footprint on the city wall. It was really terrifying. After Tongtian and the others were defeated, Lord Go, Hades' Era, Xiaopi, and Little Who moved. Rumble. The 4 modern-day heaven gods rushed out, their power of law rumbling. Lord Go focused his eyes. He raised his paw. The exquisite paw came crashing down. The smell of sweet and sour ribs lingered on it. Hades' Era grinned coldly with a spicy strip dangling between his lips. The scepter of life smashed down. The scepter grew larger and larger. It turned crimson in midair. From a distance, it looked like a magnified spicy strip. Xiaopi's body reeked of wine, and he would burp from time to time. Little Who landed on Xiaopi's back. He opened his mouth, and golden meatballs kept gathering. Ah! Dad-Ada! Dad-Ada! Little Who's eyes burst into light. Rumble! He went all out. Soul God's eyes narrowed and he growled. It was the aura of a stinky chef. The power of the great sins swept out. It surged out from behind him. It collided with the attacks of Hades' Era, Lord Go, and the other experts. Bam! 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 They were evenly matched. Perhaps it was because of the aura of Bu Fang's food. Lord Go walked slowly with his elegant cat-like step. Although he moved slowly, the flow of time suddenly slowed down. He approached Soul God in a flash. He wanted to slap Soul God to death with one paw. However, the moment he approached Soul God, who should have been frozen by the flow of time, turned his eyes and rested them on Lord Go. Lord Go thrust out his exquisite dog paw. Soul God's spear swept out. Bam! There was a violent collision, and Lord Go flew backward. Soul God's body trembled. It's useless. Even if you use the power of 3 universes, you can't suppress me. Without that chef, you're just ingredients at my mercy. Soul God laughed. His aura pierced through the universe. The black power of the great sins turned into pillars and rushed into the starry sky. Soul God let out a long howl. The shrill sound caused a huge crack to appear in the starry sky. The cracks continued to spread and grow bigger and bigger. A huge gully appeared. Then it was like a terrible universe. 1,000 years. You've lived long enough. Obediently accept your fate as delicious ingredients. Soul God sneered. He raised a hand. His scarlet eyes focused, and he waved his hand. Feel the trampling of the army of soul demons. Rumble. In the rift, the terrible power of the great sins rushed out. The moment Soul God returned, he began to summon his army of soul demons. Tongtian, Yuanshi Tianzuan, Lord Go, Hades' Era, and the others, their pupils constricted, and they felt suffocated. About 3 seconds passed after Soul God waved his hand. Many immortals and deities even tightened their grip on their weapons nervously. However, 3 seconds later, there was no army of soul demons. There were no terrifying cosmic behemoths, soul overlords, great soul overlords, and the strongest soul overlords. None of them had appeared. The starry sky was very quiet. There was a kind of awkwardness. Soul God furrowed his brows. He waved his hand again, and a terrible will surged out. Army of soul demons, come out and protect your God. Rumble. He waved his hand again, and a terrible aura swept out. However, in the vast rift, there was no army, there was no terrible aura. Only 3 figures walked out of it unhurriedly. Chapter 1834. Rumble. Soul God's terrible aura tore through the space of the primitive universe. Huge spatial rifts stretched across heaven and earth, making countless people feel numb and terrified. Heaven and earth seemed to be shaking. At this moment, the experts in the primordial cosmos were all extremely nervous. Some of the immortals gripped their weapons tightly. They knew that they could not escape what they had to face. The moment the soul god broke free from the shackles, he summoned his army of soul demons. The invincible army of soul demons was the nightmare of all universes. Once the small universe was trampled by the army of soul demons, it would be completely reduced to ruins and become a land of death. All lives would be wiped out, and everything would turn into nothingness. They are the most terrible parasites, but there is no denying it. The army of soul demons was truly the strongest army in the universe. Soul God was also very confident, because without that chef, he would be unstoppable in this world. He would be invincible, and he needed to share all this with his army of soul demons. Come out, my army of soul demons. Soul God's cold voice resounded through heaven and earth. However, the atmosphere was somewhat awkward. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, no soul demons emerged from the rift. There was not a single soul demon. Soul God's scarlet eyes narrowed slightly as he snorted coldly. His aura surged. He swung his arm. Come out, my soul, He was halfway through his sentence. In the crack that was torn open, there was no army of soul demons, and there was no terrible darkness. There were only 3 figures walking out of it unhurriedly. The one in the lead was a young man carrying a pitch-black iron sword. His face was full of vicissitudes, his beard was unkempt, and his hair fluttered in the wind, adding to his natural and unrestrained temperament. The young man walked out of the crack unhurriedly. Beside him was a round iron puppet. The golden mechanical eyes flickered, and a fan-like palm stroked its round head as it walked out. He did not look like a soul demon at all. Everyone who was floating in the void was stunned the moment they saw the metal puppet. Wu Shuang. Tong Tian had a strange look on his face. He knew Wu Shuang. Back then, he had given him a sword because he admired his understanding of the sword path. It was just that he did not expect Wu Shuang to come out of the soul demon universe. There was also that iron puppet. That puppet, wasn't it the puppet beside Bufang? Didn't this puppet disappear with Bufang? Why did he walk out of the soul demon universe? What the hell happened? The army of soul demons disappeared, replaced by a puppet and Wu Shuang. Could it be sect leader Tongtian's beard fluttered? He was inexplicably excited. He focused his eyes and looked at the huge crack. There was a third figure. A familiar figure, thin, slender, calm, expressionless. What the F***CK? F***CK. Isn't this Bufang? This kid, didn't he die? His physical body had turned into pure energy and dissipated in the world? So many people had seen him die, but in the end his corpse came back to life? It was not only Tong Tian. The experts of the untainted universe were dumbfounded. What the hell was going on? Was Bufang a man or a ghost? With his hands clasped behind his back, Bufang walked slowly out of the crack. Behind him, the crack rumbled and emanated a terrible aura. Flower petals fluttered around him, brushing past his face and causing his clothes to flutter uncontrollably. At this moment, Bufang looked like he was in a dream. It was as if he had walked out of a dream. Everyone was shocked. On Hanggu Pass, the corner of Mu Hongxi's mouth twitched violently. I told you Bufang is not dead. How could this guy be dead? How could someone who can cook a pseudo-god of cooking dish die so easily? A scourge lives for 1,000 years? This guy's acting skills are getting better and better. How could he walk out of the soul god's lair so calmly? What do you think the soul god will think if you do that? Have you ever thought about the soul god's face? Mu Hongxi just wanted to say, well done. Lord Dog blinked his eyes, and his mouth broke into a grin. Hades' era was so shocked that he almost dropped the spicy strip between his lips. Damn it! Damn it! Bufang, young man. Why are you so coquettish? In the past, Hades' era had always thought he was the most coquettish man in the world. But now, in front of Bufang, all Hades' era had left was admiration. Please accept my bow. Little Hu's and Xiaopi's little eyes lit up at the same time. They cheered. At this moment, little Hu, who was listless, was so excited that his 9 tails straightened at the same time. The eyes of Duchess Yunlan, Duchess Nightmare, and Duchess Tianlian lit up. Bufang's return seemed to bring them hope again. It's Bufang. The corner of Duchess Yunlan's mouth curved upward. She used to look down on this little chef, but now she found that chefs were really the cutest people in the world. The immortals of the primitive universe were dumbfounded. The experts of the chaotic universe were excited. Even the experts of Void City were horrified. This chef had returned after 1,000 years. Petals drifted in the air. Bufang walked out. With his hands clasped behind his back, he looked indifferently at the stunned Soul God. Long time no see, Soul God. Bufang's calm voice rang through heaven and earth. Soul God came to his senses, and his scarlet eyes narrowed. F*CKU. It's you again, you stinky chef. Why are you still alive? Soul God flew into a rage. He was so angry that he could not be contained. Why did this stinky chef walk out of the Soul Demon universe? Wait, walk out of the Soul Demon universe? Damn it! What did this stinky chef do to the Soul Demon universe? Damn it! Why are all chefs so hateful? Soul God was furious. A terrible aura towered into the sky. Damn it! Where's my army of soul demons? You stinking chef! What did you do to my army? Soul God was so angry that he was trembling all over. Bufang gave him an indifferent glance and pursed his lips. Wushuang, on the other hand, raised his hand and covered his mouth with 4 fingers. His eyes were wet and he kept rolling them back. He looked so sad that he could hardly breathe, but he also looked like he was secretly laughing. Take a guess, Wushuang said. Soul God's scarlet eyes were almost spewing fire. You're courting death. Rumble. A black spear rapidly condensed in his hand, then he threw it at Wushuang in midair. Wushuang felt a chill run through him, and he could not move at all. It was as if he was about to die. I'm just being naughty. Is there a need to kill me? Wushuang was filled with fear. He had personally experienced the terror of Soul God. His death-seeking move was very satisfying. Buzz, Xiao Bai's golden mechanical eyes flashed. It stood in front of Wushuang. Facing the spear that Soul God had thrown at him, his fan-like palm suddenly rose up and grabbed it, boom! The spear kept spinning in Xiao Bai's hand, spinning violently as if to pierce through everything. The power of the great sins spread. Wushuang felt a chill run down his spine. However, Xiao Bai had blocked the spear. A crack rang out. His fan-like palm slammed down. He actually shattered Soul God's great sin spear with brute force. Oh! Soul God paused. All the experts present were taken aback. Even the mighty Tongtian and Yuanshi Tianzuan sucked in a cold breath. They knew very well how terrible Soul God's great sin spear was. They did not expect that it would be shattered by Xiao Bai with a slap. Wushuang breathed a sigh of relief. His body was already soaked with sweat. He was too smug. After all, he was facing Soul God. Fortunately, Lord Bai was here. Lord Bai is so strong. Wushuang followed behind Whitey and shouted, "Let's go!" Bufang walked out slowly. He stood at the mouth of the rift, his robe fluttering in the wind. Bufang looked at the shattered void in the distance. He raised his hand. Buzz, it was as if there was a strange energy fluctuation spreading between heaven and earth. Then, in the shattered black ball of the great sins, a blue and white porcelain plate covered with cracks flew over and fell into Bufang's hand. The blue and white porcelain plate was covered with cracks and was on the verge of shattering. Bufang sighed. Soul God narrowed his eyes. He did not look at Bufang. His scarlet eyes were fixed on the rift behind Bufang. Inside, the sky was full of flowers and petals. What the hell? Where did the Soul Demon universe get flowers from? Soul God was dumbfounded. Bufang took a step forward. He walked through the void. There was no energy fluctuation on his body, making him look like a mortal. Xiao Bai and Wushuang followed behind him. The Soul Demon universe is really nice. The sky is full of prosperity and warmth, Bu Fang said faintly. He raised his hand. 5 beams of golden light shot toward him at the same time. They flew to Bu Fang's side and hovered around him. The god of cooking set, the black turtle constellation wok, the Chilan transmigration ladle, the white tiger heaven stove, the vermilion robe, and the dragon bone kitchen knife. He had not seen them for 1,000 years, but they somehow felt familiar. The god of cooking sets floated around him. The once dazzling god of cooking sets were now covered with cracks, with black smoke swirling around them. Bu Fang had a complicated look on his face. It was contaminated by the soul god's black energy, and it nearly broke. Bu Fang raised his hand. Then, he snapped his fingers. There was an explosion with a bang. Inside the black ball of the great sins, a beam of golden light rose into the sky. The true form of Bu Fang's divine sense strode over. The true form of his divine sense dimmed. He landed at Bu Fang's side. It echoed in sync with Bu Fang's mental frequency. Bu Fang raised his hand and pointed a finger at the true form of his divine sense. The true form of his divine sense also raised its finger and touched Bu Fang's finger. Buzz, it spread in all directions like ripples. The true form of his divine sense dissipated and turned into thousands of golden specks of light. Like rain, they sprinkled on the god of cooking set. The black chi on it melted like snow. The god of cooking sets regained their luster, and their aura even became stronger. The dazzling golden light illuminated the whole universe. Dragons roared, birds cried, turtles roared, tigers roared, and Chilants laughed. All of them lingered in the universe. The true forms of the artifact spirits emerged, while the shadows of divine beasts swirled and suppressed the heavens. Finally, the light faded. They turned into 5 figures, staring at Bu Fang excitedly. Bu Fang nodded at the 5 artifact spirits, who looked excited. Then, he glanced at Lord Go and Hades' era in the distance, twitched the corner of his mouth, and nodded. He scanned the primordial universe and nodded at sect leader Tongtian and Hangu Pass. I'm back. Chapter 1835. Even 1,000 years ago, this puppet was not this strong. It was a wonderful idea and a bold one. The power of the great sins surged, turned into a terrible black dragon, gathered around him, and rushed toward Xiao Bai. Whether it was Bu Fang or Xiao Bai, they were both models worthy of learning. One of the immortals roared. Golden waves of air gushed out of the holes. It was really funny. He stomped his foot in the starry sky. Instead, 3 familiar faces appeared. Soul God's scarlet eyes seemed to flow out of his eyes and hover in midair. Xiao Bai. He was knocked flying away by Soul God and struck by the spear again and again. Although Soul God had not formed a fleshly body and was not in the most perfect state, this puppet was freakishly strong. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flashed, and his mouth twitched slightly. He grabbed the broken scale in his hand and was knocked flying away. The golden light in his mechanical eyes grew brighter and brighter. Was it faith? Bam! It kept rushing into Soul God's body. Again and again, the power of the great sins exploded. Have you received the food I sent you? They sat around and deflected the waves of air, preventing them from crashing into heaven and earth and destroying the earth. Little Hu wagged his tail. Xiao Bai, on the other hand, was simple and violent. He was a melee fighter. Get lost. Another wave, and another wave. Now, the flowers are beautiful, the moon is full, the grass is long, and the orioles are flying. You will like it very much. Soul God did not know what was going on, but he could feel the malice in Wushuang's laughter. Bam! Fight! Wushuang took a deep breath. Xiao Bai, on the other hand, was riddled with scars. Perhaps Bu Fang was the only one in the whole world who could do this. All Lord Bai wanted was to be stripped. He would do anything. How strong he was would be revealed now. Soul God's furious and humiliated roar resounded through all the worlds in the universe. He fought with Soul God again. Troublemaker, you will be stripped as an example to others. This puppet is completely different from 1,000 years ago. The corner of Bu Fang's mouth curled up slightly. Beauty. See that? This move of Master Bai's was stolen from I have the Hades clothes ripping finger, which is much cooler than this clothes ripping hand. The immortals' collective roar of fight came to an abrupt end. Bu Fang said lightly. Was his sense of humor too high? Many of the experts present thought of the scene when Soul God raised his arm and shouted for the army of soul demons, and for some reason, they found it somewhat funny. Bu Fang clasped his hands behind his back, and the god of cooking Set hovered around him. Under the surging power of the great sins, Xiao Bai was like a small boat that was about to capsize. They confronted each other. The entire starry sky reverberated with this blood-boiling battle cry. The golden light moved rapidly in the void. However, some immortals felt their blood boil and their eyes brim with tears. Imagining Soul God swimming in the sea of flowers, Wu Shuang laughed so hard that he could not help but lie on the ground and punch it. Soul God would never have guessed that Bu Fang had gone behind him and done whatever he wanted in his soul demon universe. Duchess Yunlan, Duchess Nightmare, and so on buzz. Suddenly Bu Fang asked. Countless stars were smashed into pieces. A scale armor was torn apart by Xiao Bai. The cry contained an unyielding will. The tremendous pressure made many experts in the starry sky feel depressed. Looking at the petals drifting out of the rift, Soul God had a strange feeling. In the starry sky, could it be Xiao Bai did not care at all? Although Xiao Bai was knocked flying away again and again, his perseverance touched all the immortals and deities. The next moment, he threw a punch at Soul God. The power of the great sins kept rolling. What happened? The rift suddenly collapsed. The battle between Soul God and Xiao Bai was earth-shattering. Even the strongest soul overlord was knocked back by Xiao Bai. Bu Fang boy, don't be so sad next time. You made Lord Go unable to eat sweet and sour ribs for days. A huge black energy ball exploded in an instant. Wu Shuang could understand what he was saying. He had cut off Soul God's army, but Xiao Bai was still attacking relentlessly. Yuanshi Tianzuan shouldered the sky-splitting axe, stroked his beard, and laughed. All the experts present sucked in their breath. Xiao Bai's golden mechanical eyes narrowed. Both Soul God and Xiao Bai had reached the peak of the perfected chaotic saint realm, which was enough to crush everyone present. Bam! 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 Bu Fang came to Lord Go, Hades' era, and the others and told them he was safe. Get lost! One immortal after another roared involuntarily. There was no spiritual energy in the soul demon universe, so they would consume their magic power every time they used their divine abilities. If their magic power could not be replenished, they would certainly not be able to defeat the soul demons. Bu Fang wondered if what he said just now was funny. It was as if huge waves were stacking on top of each other. I didn't do anything. I helped you clean up the soul demon universe based on the principle of serving the public, sharing one world, and one dream. However, in the sky it was a good idea, but it was too difficult to put it into action. However, it now seemed that Bu Fang had completed the feat rumble. For some reason, it conveyed a hint of satisfaction. Without the army of soul demons, the only enemy they had to deal with was Soul God. Soon, a beam of golden light flew over, stepping on the starry sky. This is a world-shaking battle. Even His Excellency doesn't need to do anything, and Lord Bai alone can suppress Soul God? Lord Go's eyes lit up. He had challenged the almost invincible Soul God again and again. The people around him were also struck dumb. But not the army of soul demons. When had he, Soul God, ever been laughed at? Wonderful! His Excellency had transformed the abyssal land into a garden universe. I'll stop courting death. I'll stop courting death. This made things much easier. Soul God's spear swept out. The power of the great sins turned into thousands of spears, merged into one, and struck Xiao Bai. In fact, compared to Soul God, the army of soul demons was even more terrifying. Little Hu jumped onto Bufang's shoulder, while Xiaopi lay on Bufang's head and blew bubbles. Stinky chef, what have you done to my soul demon universe? The battle grew fiercer and fiercer. There was not even a blade of grass in the soul demon universe, let alone a petal. Wushuang was knocked back several steps by the blast. Don't thank me. I'm just nature's porter. Xiaopi blew bubbles, looking very excited. He threw the spear out from a terrifying distance. The army of soul demons was like a swarm of locusts, barren and plunging all living beings into misery and suffering. That was the real disaster. Even the void was suddenly distorted. Tong Tian, Yuanshi Tianzuan, and the others did not dare to relax. In an instant, Xiao Bai's body turned into a beam of golden light, leaving a long trail in the void as he charged toward Soul God. Now Wushuang's admiration for Bufang was like a raging river, flowing for 1,000 miles. Xiao Bai's mechanical voice shook the universe. His scarlet eyes were bursting with anger. Their eyes shone brightly as they stared at the battle with hope in their eyes. If there was no way to deal with it, the soul demons would eventually come back. Bufang frowned. After Bufang's modification, Xiao Bai's fighting prowess had become very strong. Xiao Bai turned into a beam of golden light and began to fight Soul God in the starry sky. He was too strong. The next moment, Xiao Bai's aura suddenly skyrocketed. Oh no! His huge palm moved up from the bottom to the top and pulled out. Hovering in midair, he was surrounded by the power of the great sins, which turned into a spear and was caught by him. Although his body was constantly recovering, it was still a little slow. Do you want to learn, beauty? If so, I'll teach you. However, Xiao Bai was indeed a genius. In the soul demon universe, he was extremely fearsome as he fought against many enemies alone. Hades' era nodded. I was provoked by you. I've been saving spicy strips and dare not eat too fast. A loud noise rang out. Was it an obsession? This soul god had his eyes on him and wanted to kill him twice. If it were not for Lord Bai, he might have been dead. In midair, shockwaves rippled out from the void. Bufang clasped his hands behind his back, his face cold. His vermilion robe, which alternated between red and white, made him look heroic. He's so strong. Now's the time. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched slightly. He was inexplicably happy to see these old friends again. Except, of course, for Bufang, whose strength could not be seen through. Soul God's eyes were scarlet as he stared at Xiao Bai. Holding the pitch-black spear of the great sins, he thrust it out, unleashing the power of the great sins. Don't you like stripping people? Strip Soul God's clothes, and your legend will resound throughout the universe. Ha 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 ha! Bam! Then bam! 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 Xiao Bai was 1 inch away from Soul God. Facing this puppet, he felt as if he was facing a universe. It was very difficult for him to face a perfected chaotic saint. Then, the voice began to spread. Therefore, they never thought that they could go around to the soul demon universe and kill the soul demon. You're courting death. Bufang glanced at Wushuang, who was laughing so hard that he could not stand straight. He did not seem to understand what he was laughing about. Compared to Soul God, who was using the power of the great sins, Nether King Ha said to a beautiful female immortal. The fairy was speechless. Bufang raised his hand and patted Xiao Bai's belly. Bam! The other experts also came over to greet Bufang. With a spicy strip dangling from his lips, Hades' era was extremely excited. He turned to the beautiful fairy beside him and said, Beauty, do you see this handsome and burly god of war? He's my buddy. A battle that surpassed the level of a perfected chaotic saint, Bufang said. Compared to the original Soul Demon universe and the current Soul Demon universe, Soul God's eyes narrowed. Damn puppet! As disgusting as a stinky chef. Lord Go rolled his eyes. Xiao Bai's huge palm had already landed on his body. A small hole was torn open on his elbow. Xiao Bai's stripping technique exploded out in an instant. The people around him were dumbfounded. They seemed a little confused and did not understand. He actually knocked Soul God back with just one punch. Rip! His fist, his kick, and even his round head could be hit. Xiao Bai's body was exuding hot steam. With a ripping sound, he turned into a beam of red light, crossed tens of thousands of miles in a flash, and appeared in front of Wushuang. Fight! His body spun in the starry sky. Surprisingly, the puppet's punch wasn't any weaker than the Soul God's. He glanced at Soul God, then at the many experts around him. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly. In the end, he could not hold back and burst out laughing again. He really could not help but want to laugh. His voice soared into the clouds and shook the starry sky. That's really great! And he has changed so much in just 1,000 years. There was no magic power or divine power in Xiao Bai's body, only surging golden waves. It was a kind of power that belonged to the origin. The golden waves scattered slightly. All that was left of his body was the golden wave. Countless immortals and deities witnessed the battle. Soul God was in great trouble after all. The corners of the immortals' mouths twitched. Wushuang's laughter stopped abruptly. Xiao Bai's golden mechanical eyes flashed. After all, the lair of the Soul Demon was not a place that ordinary people could go to. Countless soldiers were watching the battle, and all they felt was shock. Soul God's pupils constricted. The Lord Go said. His mechanical eyes gleamed brightly. What terrible things did this stinky chef do to my Soul Demon universe during the 1,000 years I was sealed? On the other side, Bam. However, Xiao Bai did not back down. A terrible aura pressed down like a mountain. In the starry sky, this gave them some breathing room. The more Soul God fought, the angrier he became. Xiao Bai threw a punch at Soul God. Some immortals and deities even recorded this historic scene with immortal stones. Then, Xiao Bai seemed to have turned into a blazing sun, shining brilliantly and illuminating the entire starry sky. However, a terrible force exploded out in an instant. Even though he was hit by the black dragon formed by the power of the great sins, he still felt that it was a good idea. He really thought it was a good idea to go to the Soul Demon universe and get rid of the army of soul demons before the Soul God came out. The clothes-stripping hand kept sweeping and smashing down with its huge fist. If it were them, they might not be able to come out after entering the Soul Demon universe. In addition to the clothes-stripping hand, there's also this kick. Let me tell you, Lord Bai and I are brothers. We grew up wearing the same pair of pants. Or to prove himself? Xiao Bai, go all out. Let the world witness your return. Xiao Bai was slammed into a planet, completely shattering it. However, what the King unyielding willpower was. What made Xiao Bai fight so hard and disregard failure? Yo! Lord Bai is mighty. Rumble! Countless wisps of the black energy of the great sins were torn to pieces. Chapter 1836. What Xiao Bai longed for was to strip him. Even though he had only taken off a small piece of Soul God's scale, Xiao Bai seemed to have a satisfied smile on his face. Rumble! A rumbling sound rang out. Xiao Bai's body slammed into the star, causing it to sink deeply. The next moment, cracks spread all over it, and the star exploded. In midair, Soul God's power of the great sin spread and enveloped his body. He was so furious that his whole body was shaking. He could not believe that he had suffered such humiliation. This damned iron puppet actually dared to strip his clothes. The most hateful thing was that the puppet had succeeded in taking off a small piece of his scale. On the broken pieces of the star, Xiao Bai rose to his feet. The golden heat around him dissipated, and he held the black scale in his hand as if he was holding an enemy's flag. Behind him, thousands of rays of light surged. But soon, the scale turned into the black power of the great sins and began to slip through his fingers like gravel. Xiao Bai lowered his arm, his mechanical eyes flashing. "It's useless. Do you really think a mere puppet can stop me?" Soul God's cold voice rang through the universe. "I am Soul God, the god of soul demons, a supreme being who stands above heaven and earth. Who do you think you are? All of you can only beg for mercy before me." Rumble. Soul God's scarlet eyes gradually narrowed. Then, he raised his hand. The power of the great sins spread, and soon, one figure after another condensed around him. The power of the 7 great sins turned into 7 figures. Soul God raised his hand. Each wisp of the power of the great sins condensed into a pure black crystal. Do you think the great soul overlords born in the soul demon universe are the real great soul overlords? Wrong. The real great soul overlords have always been under my command. Otherwise, how could I have killed Sloth great soul overlord so easily 1,000 years ago? Because he has always been with me. Rumble. 7 black crystals floated up into the air. The expressions of all the experts in the untainted universe changed, becoming extremely unsightly. A real great soul overlord? Could it be that those great soul overlords were all fake? Xiao Bai's entire body was steaming hot. The wounds left on his body by the battle with Soul God gradually healed. It floated beside Bufang. Although Xiao Bai had formidable fighting prowess, he was still no match for Soul God. Soul God was too strong. Although he had not collected the heart, even Xiao Bai, who was now at the peak, could only be suppressed by him. It was hard to imagine how strong the Soul God would be after he collected the heart. This was also the reason why Bufang had been looking for a breakthrough. Soul God had truly stepped into the pinnacle of the ruthless path. As for Bufang's emotional path, he was still lacking. Don't underestimate this sliver. This sliver of difference was extremely huge. Rumble. The expressions of the experts of the primitive universe, the chaotic universe, and Void City all changed. Lord Go's eyes were solemn. "What should we do?" Lord Go asked. Bufang also furrowed his brows. "He hasn't collected his heart yet. We can seal him again." Bufang said. "Are you confident?" Lord Go looked at Bufang and asked. "No." Bufang shook his head. Lord Go was stunned, and so was Hades' Era. "It's not that easy. Don't tell me you'll fall into the same pit twice?" Bufang looked at Lord Go and asked. Lord Go was stunned. Yes, the Soul God was not stupid. In the distant sky, around Soul God's body, 7 powerful auras spread out, the terrifying power of great sins spread out, shaking the void. This kind of terror was incomparable. Buzz, 7 figures condensed in the void. To everyone's surprise, the 7 figures all had the same face and the same body. The great soul overlords of the 7 sins were actually the same person? Or rather, it could not be said to be the same person. It could only be said that they had the same face. The 7 figures all had human faces. Their faces were handsome and beautiful, just like perfect human beings. They could not tell their genders apart. Stimulated by the power of the great sins, they gradually recovered. Buzz, the 7 figures opened their eyes. Each of them was cold and ruthless. How terrifying! One of the immortals looked into the eyes of one of the figures, and his mind trembled. They're so strong. The sect leader's eyes narrowed. He felt an unparalleled pressure. The expressions of Yuanshi Tianzuan, Lord Go, Lady Nuwa, and the others changed dramatically. "Do you feel it?" Bufang said. Lord Go nodded. 7 great soul overlords. Each has the power of a perfected chaotic saint. This is going to be tricky. The flesh on Lord Go's face trembled. Bufang took a deep breath. In midair, Soul God had become a little weak. As soon as he broke the seal, he had used most of the power of the great sins to stimulate the great soul overlords of the 7 sins. He must have done this for a purpose. Soul God had wanted to rely on the army of soul demons to cover him. But now, he could only rely on the 7 great soul overlords. These 7 great soul overlords must be the trump card that Soul God had hidden for a long time. The reason why he had not used them before was that he had been pressed to the ground by Bufang and sealed with a pseudo-god of cooking dish before he could react. But this time, he had learned his lesson. The 7 perfected chaotic saints made the Cosmic Alliance feel extremely troubled. There were 4 perfected chaotic saints in the primitive universe. There was 1 in the chaotic universe. Void City, on the other hand, did not have a single one. No matter how they looked at it, the 7 of them were going to lose. Soul God is going to flee. He's not confident that he can defeat me, so he's going to hide and gather his heart. At that time, he'll be invincible. When that time comes, he will be invincible, Bufang said expressionlessly. Everyone's expression was filled with terror. If what Bufang said was true, it would be terrible. We must stop him. Tong Tian focused his eyes. If what Bufang said was true, today was their only chance to suppress Soul God. Kill him. Tong Tian stepped into the void. The immortal slaughtering sword array and the Qingping sword wheeled around him as he charged toward Soul God. Yuan Shi Tianzuan, Lady Nuwa, and the Buddha also attacked at the same time. They also realized the seriousness of the matter. Rumble. The corners of Soul God's mouth twitched slightly. He raised his hand. With a flick of his finger, he flicked his finger. The 7 great soul overlords moved at the same time. The aura unleashed by the 7 ruthless great soul overlords was not weaker than that of any perfected chaotic saint. Meanwhile, the 7 great soul overlords had constructed the heavenly demon array. This was the real heavenly demon array. As soon as it fell, heaven and earth seemed to be crushed and completely shattered. Rumble. There was a collision. Tong Tian and the others were pushed back by the impact. Damn it! The faces of the sect leader and the others turned somewhat unsightly. It seemed that even with their primitive divine artifacts, they could not suppress the array. Tong Tian clenched his teeth. Where are the 10,000 immortals? Construct the 10,000 immortals array. Tong Tian said. His voice resounded through the universe. The immortals and deities who were watching the show focused their eyes. One by one, they soared into the sky. Mighty immortal energy erupted from the heavenly demon's body. Yuan Shi Tianzuan and Tong Tian each constructed the 10,000 immortals array with their primitive divine artifacts to fight against the heavenly demon array. Dong, there was a dull sound of a bell. The sky-covering Buddha sat cross-legged in midair. He was chanting Sanskrit. All the arhats and Buddhas hovered in midair. Under the guidance of the sky-covering Buddha, they constructed the 10,000 Buddha array. 3 terrible arrays collided in midair. They were evenly matched. Soul God narrowed his eyes. The corners of his mouth twitched slightly. He took a step. The void next to him was torn apart. He planned to flee back to the soul demon universe. He was constantly thinking about how to deal with these guys. When he collected the hearts, that would be the time when he was invincible. The stinky chef would no longer be able to stop him. Just as Soul God was about to step into the rift and flee, an indifferent voice suddenly resounded by his side. Aren't you going to catch up with your old friend? Bufang said expressionlessly. Clad in his striped red and white vermilion robe, Bufang looked at Soul God. Stinky chef. One day, I'll smash you into minced meat and swallow you alive. Soul God grinned and said coldly and ruthlessly. Lord Go and Xiao Bai stood beside Bufang. Their auras were powerful. You've only suppressed me for 1,000 years, and yet you dare to call me an old friend. Who do you think you are? Soul God's eyes were flowing with fierceness. However, Bufang was indifferent. He was not angry at Soul God's disdainful words. You know whether we're old friends or not, Bufang said, giving Soul God a complicated look. His eyes were filled with determination. With hands clasped behind his back, he took a step forward. Xiao Bai's golden mechanical eyes swiveled. He was about to strike. However, Bufang waved his hand and stopped him. "Let me do it," Bufang said. As soon as he finished speaking, Bufang's figure disappeared from where he was. When he reappeared, he was in front of Soul God. In Bufang's eyes, golden light burst forth. The god of cookings I had long since become one with Bufang. Scarlet energy filled Soul God's eyes and collided with the golden light. Both of them rumbled in the void. The void twisted and collapsed. This time, their eyes seemed to look through the long river of the universe. Soul God's mouth twitched. "You're still a little lacking," he said. He continued to step into the crack in the void. Bufang raised his hand. "I'm not fighting you. We can't fight. We're chefs, so we'll solve it the way chefs do," Bufang said, the corner of his mouth twitching slightly. The next moment, his mind flickered. The white tiger heaven stove, the black turtle constellation wok, the Qilin ladle, and the dragon bone kitchen knife emerged. Bufang was cooking in the void. His movements were neither fast nor slow. Although they looked slow, they were actually as fast as lightning. The seemingly ordinary flame was as hot and full of hope as the primordial fire of the human race. Sizzle! Sizzle! A rich aroma wafted through the void. Bufang's hand shook. He flipped the Qilin transmigration ladle. Inside the blue and white porcelain bowl, a dish that was blooming with golden light burst forth. A simple bowl of egg-fried rice floated in midair. "This is my best dish. Let's end it all with this dish." Bufang looked at Soul God. Xiao Bai and Lord Go hovered in the distance, watching quietly. In the distance, explosions rang out. Terrible arrays were colliding. On Bufang's side, it was peaceful. Bufang and Soul God were chatting like old friends who had not seen each other for many years. Of course, in fact, a storm was brewing between the two. Soul God stared at Bufang, his scarlet eyes glancing at Bufang's sincere eyes. Then, he glanced at the steaming and fragrant egg-fried rice in Bufang's hand. The atmosphere seemed to become dense. After a long time, Bufang grinned and laughed. His laughter shook heaven and earth. "Stinky chef, you want to trick me again? Do you think I'm stupid? Fall into the same pit twice," Soul God said coldly. Then, he took out a black spear and threw it at Bufang. He wanted to pierce Bufang's soul and nail Bufang to death in midair. Bufang sighed deeply. He flicked his finger. An earth-yellow chaos pot spun out and collided with the black spear. An explosion rang through the sky. Bufang was unscathed. Soul God, on the other hand, took a step forward coldly and stepped into the spatial rift. "Just you wait, stinky chef. When I collect the heart, it will be the day of your death." Buzz, the rift slowly healed. Bufang frowned. He flicked his finger. Immediately, the egg-fried rice in his hand turned into a stream of light and rushed into the rift. At last, the rift disappeared completely. At the last moment, the crack disappeared. Bufang seemed to hear Soul God's furious roar. "You damn stinking chef!" In the Soul Demon universe, Soul God stood in midair. He saw a dish sealed on every planet in the Soul Demon universe, which was full of life force. Every star was blooming with life. Petals fluttered in the air. A rich fragrance swirled. He looked at everything that was unfamiliar to him. Soul God roared angrily. At this moment, the void was torn apart. A bowl of steaming egg-fried rice floated in front of Soul God. Chapter 1837. The egg-fried rice floated in midair, exuding a rich aroma. However, in Soul God's eyes, it was as if the damn chef was laughing at him. He looked at the bowl of egg-fried rice. Soul God raised his palm. He would never eat it, not in this lifetime. He would never eat that stinky chef's dish. The power of the great sins spread in his palm. With a loud rumble, the dish was thrown away, turned into a shooting star, and disappeared into the sky. Soul God's scarlet eyes narrowed. Then, he glanced at the surrounding world. The soul demon universe, which was once filled with evil energy, was now planted with flowers and plants on every planet. A bowl of dish was placed on each planet. Soul God glanced coldly. Without exception, there was a dish hovering over every major planet. Moreover, it was the same for his lair. This chef deserves to die. Soul God's eyes were cold. 7 streaks of black light emerged. 7 experts emerged around Soul God. They were 7 great soul overlords, and each of them had the cultivation base of a perfected saint. They were extremely terrifying. They were Soul God's strongest trump card. Soul God glanced at the soul demon universe. He did not restore it. After all, Bufang's dishes had a great impact on him. He had spent a great deal of energy to summon the 7 great soul overlords. Now, if he continued to spend a great deal of energy to deal with these dishes, he would be playing into the chef's hands. Therefore, Soul God did not focus on the soul demon universe. His vision was not there. What was a mere soul demon universe? In the future, the primitive universe, the chaotic universe, and Void City would all belong to him. By the way, that woman in Void City seems to be about to awaken. I must find my heart before she awakens. Soul God focused his eyes. He glanced at the 7 great soul overlords. Open the passage to Earth and restrain your aura. We'll live in peace for a while. When we gather our hearts back, it will be time to kill that chef. Soul God said. He had to admit that he was a little afraid of Bufang. He sensed a familiar dangerous aura from Bufang's body. Soul God was not stupid. Although Bufang was strong, he had not taken that step. Bufang had emotions, but emotions could not reach the pinnacle. Therefore, as long as he gathered his heart, he would be invincible. The 7 great soul overlords nodded. Chaotic universe. Soul God had fled. Sect leader Tongtian and the other experts felt it was a pity. He had wanted to use this opportunity to suppress Soul God again. He did not expect that Soul God still had 7 great soul overlords as his trump card. This was something they did not expect. They had thought that the 7 great soul overlords of the soul demon universe were the real great soul overlords, but it turned out that it was all fake. The real great soul overlord had been hiding all this time. Bufang was very calm. It was a stark contrast to the anxiety of Tongtian and the others. Bufang was not surprised that Soul God could escape. After 1,000 years of cultivation, Bufang's cultivation base was strong, but it was not strong enough to kill Soul God. What should we do? Lord Go asked, looking at Bufang. Don't worry. Even if Soul God returns to the soul demon universe, it's useless. His cultivation base can't improve to the peak in a short time, because the soul demon universe no longer contains any power of the great sins. Bufang said. Lord Go paused. Tongtian and the other experts were slightly stunned. What did he mean? I've placed a dish on every planet in the soul demon universe. Although those dishes are not as strong as the one that suppressed Soul God for 1,000 years, it will still take him a lot of effort to get rid of them, Bufang said. Bufang clasped his hands behind his back. His vermilion robe flapped noisily in the universe. So, if Soul God is not stupid, he will not get rid of the dishes. Although the soul demon universe is important to him, his ambition is not limited to that. What he needs is all the universes. So, Soul God will certainly open a passage to Earth. His heart is on Earth, Bufang said. At this point, Bufang could not help but frown. Tongtian and the others froze. What Bufang said made sense. What if Soul God is stupid? Hades Era asked with a spicy strip dangling from his mouth. Lord Go, Bufang, Tongtian, and the others all glanced at him. Those who thought of Soul God as a fool were the real fools. Hades Era felt a little creeped out by their gazes. He flew into a rage out of shame and said, "Why are you looking at me as if I'm a fool? I've been to Earth in the past 1,000 years. But I don't know where Soul God's heart is suppressed. I can't sense it. Bufang ignored Hades' era and stroked his chin. Tong Tian, Yuanshi Tianzuan, Lady Nuwa, and the other experts frowned at the same time. Earth is the ancestral planet of mankind. Why would it suppress Soul God's heart? Although it is the ancestral planet of mankind, given Earth's level, it should not be able to suppress Soul God's heart. Yuanshi Tianzuan said. They had a headache at the moment and did not quite understand the reason behind it. But, no matter what, we must send someone to the ancestral planet. We must get Soul God's heart before Soul God does. Tong Tian said. There was no doubt that they had to go there themselves. Bufang nodded. Since he could not figure it out, he stopped analyzing it. In any case, he had given them the idea. Tong Tian and the others nodded to Bufang, then turned into streams of light and disappeared. The immortals and deities of Hangu Pass were still guarding the place. After all, everything was not over yet. In the chaotic universe, in the center of the chaos space, Bufang landed and walked in the familiar chaos space. Lord Go, Hades' era, Xiaopi, and Little who were at his side. Bufang sighed with emotion. He had comprehended 5 supreme laws of the universe, and to be honest, it had an inseparable relationship with the chaos space. All 4 heaven god palaces had emerged and had been repaired. After visiting each of them, Bufang's expression grew more and more complicated. He could not believe that all 4 heaven gods, time, space, destruction, and life, were related to him. Was this a coincidence? Perhaps it was. After all, he had obtained the god of cooking's legacy, which was at the level of an ancestral god. The energy he unintentionally emitted could affect everything around him. With his hands clasped behind his back, Bufang looked at the dilapidated temple of heaven god transmigration. His expression did not change at all. Since heaven god transmigration died, the position of heaven god transmigration has been vacant. You used to be his substitute, but I don't think you can continue to hold this position now. Lord Go looked at Bufang and said. Bufang nodded. Why don't you give I a part-time job? Hades' era's eyes lit up. Bufang glanced at Hades' era and shook his head. Heaven God Transmigration was in charge of the chaotic universe's cycle of life and death. Who knew what kind of trouble would arise if Hades' era was in charge? Therefore, both Lord Go and Bufang refused at the same time. Hades' era felt a little pity. Bufang clasped his hands behind his back. He looked at the boundless chaotic universe. Suddenly, he seemed to think of something. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched slightly. I have a candidate for Heaven God Transmigration, Bufang said. Oh! Lord Go, Hades' era, and the others were slightly stunned. The next moment, Bufang raised his hand and snapped his fingers. Golden specks of light emerged and wrapped around their bodies. Suddenly they swirled. Then, they disappeared in the Immortal Spirit Divine Dynasty, in the palace of the Empress of the Immortal Spirit Divine Dynasty. After the calamity of the Soul Demon, the Immortal Spirit Divine Dynasty had completely recovered. Now it was prosperous and full of experts. On top of that, the Immortal Spirit Divine Dynasty had a new empress, which made it extremely powerful. Vaguely, it even had a tendency to surpass the Xiaoyu Divine Dynasty and become the center of the chaotic universe. In the depths of the Immortal Spirit Divine Dynasty's palace, white specks of light emerged. The figures of Bufang, Lord Go, and Hades' era emerged. Their appearance was too sudden. The guards in the palace could not react in time. By the time the patrolling guards came to their senses, the 3 of them had already appeared. The guards' hair stood on end. They could not believe that these people could appear out of thin air in the Empress Palace. How strong were these people? Could it be that the formation outside the palace was fake? The Immortal Spirit Divine Dynasty? Lord Go paused slightly. Hades' era's eyes lit up as if he remembered something. Bufang boy, do you want that little girl to inherit Heaven God Transmigration's position? Hades' era said. The corner of Bu Fang's mouth twitched slightly. The surrounding guards aimed their weapons at them. Bu Fang, Lord Go, and the others did not care. He raised a hand and snapped his fingers. Clatter. The next moment, the guards' bodies stiffened. Come, let's meet an old friend, Bu Fang said. Who? How dare you break into the immortal spirit divine dynasty's palace? All of a sudden, just as Bu Fang and the others were about to take a step forward, a cold and indifferent voice rang out from the depths of the palace. Rumble. A tremendous pressure swept over. The pressure of a half-step god-emperor swept across the whole place. Then a cold, black-clothed woman walked through the air from the depths of the palace's corridor. She walked over step by step. Bu Fang's face was indifferent. He clasped his hands behind his back and looked indifferently at the figure walking toward him. It's the Imperial Preceptor. The Imperial Preceptor is here. These guys who dare to break into the palace will die. I can't believe it's the Imperial Preceptor. I can't believe he is here. The surrounding guards sucked in a breath of cold air. Amo's face was cold. Her heart had not wavered for 1,000 years. Now, someone dared to break into the female palace. Imo held a sword and raised it slightly. Suddenly, the tip of her sword paused. Because in the distance, it was a familiar figure. The moment Imo saw the figure, her body instantly trembled like a leaf in the wind. A fear of being dominated instantly filled her mind. Many scenes that had been silent for 1,000 years suddenly spread in front of her eyes. Hiss! Imo sucked in a breath of cold air and quickly sheathed her sword. Your Excellency, is it really you? Imo was terrified. Rumor had it that this Excellency had ascended to the primal chaos? He had become the supreme modern-day heaven god. Now, why was he back? Bu Fang looked at Imo, the woman who had once protected Xiao Yanyu. Although they had not seen each other for 1,000 years, the latter's aura had become stronger. Rumble. Deep in the palace, a majestic aura was released. Lord Go and Hades' era both grinned. Oh, the little girl has sensed our aura. This little girl has reached the heaven god realm. Sure enough, those who are with Bu Fang are all monsters. Hades' era said. In the sky, a baiguang spun rapidly and instantly exploded from outside the palace. A huge hole was blasted in the roof. Xiao Yanyu, dressed in a loose robe, fell to the ground. Owner Bu. Xiao Yanyu looked at Bu Fang in surprise. When Imo saw Xiao Yanyu, the corners of her mouth curled into a gentle smile. Greetings, Your Majesty. Bu Fang put his hands behind his back, looked at his old friend, and nodded. Not bad. As expected of someone who has comprehended 4 supreme laws of the universe. It's you, Bu Fang said. He looked at Lord Go and Hades' era. What do you think? Lord Go grinned and nodded. Hades' era naturally had no objection. Old Xiao, one of the modern-day causality positions of the heaven god in the chaos space, is vacant. Are you interested? Bu Fang asked. Xiao Yanyu was stunned. Imo, who was standing at the side, trembled with joy. The modern-day causality position of the heaven god? That was the supreme position in the chaotic universe. Yes, I'm interested. Imo answered quickly. I didn't ask you. Hades' era rolled his eyes at Imo. Xiao Yanyu had calmed down now. The causality position of the heaven god was indeed a rare opportunity. She had no reason to refuse. Lord Go and Hades' era did not refuse. However, Xiao Yanyu still needed to undergo some tests and training to inherit the causality position of heaven god transmigration. However, this matter needed to be considered at length. When the three returned to the chaos space with Xiao Yanyu, a terrifying tremor spread from the distant universe. Bu Fang, Lord Go, and Hades' era focused their eyes. The aura came from its void city. Could it be that you are coming out of seclusion? Chapter 1838. An invisible wave spread throughout the entire universe. Bufang and Lord Go raised their eyebrows when they sensed it. The fluctuation came from Void City. Perhaps only you, who is receiving the Queen's legacy in the palace of the Queen of Curses, can send out such an energy fluctuation. Bufang and Lord Go looked in the direction of Void City. Although they were separated by a universe, they could see that Void City was undergoing great changes. "Let's go." Bufang looked at Lord Go and said. His voice rang out. Bufang, Lord Go, and Hades' era all soared into the sky. Wushuang flew on his sword, stepping on it as if he had broken through the shackles of time. Golden light and hot air gushed out of Xiao Bai's feet, turned into a beam of golden light, and rushed out of the universe. Xiao Xiaopi and Little Hu, on the other hand, were hanging on to Xiao Bai. Xiao Yinyu's dress fluttered as she watched Bufang and the others disappear. The corners of her mouth curved slightly as she walked toward the Temple of Heaven God Transmigration. She still had a lot to learn if she wanted to inherit Heaven God Transmigration's causality throne. In the Temple of Heaven God Transmigration, Bufang and the others descended into Void City. Their trip to Void City this time was completely different from the last time. The dukes immediately sensed Bufang's arrival. They opened the gates and welcomed Bufang in. Now, Bufang was qualified to be welcomed by them. District D opened. Countless exiles looked at Bufang from a distance. They were terrified. The aura emanating from Bufang and the others terrified them. "Are these the people who were exiled to Void City?" Wushuang asked, carrying his iron sword. It was the first time he had seen these exiles. Every exiled man had a story, but Wushuang was not interested in these stories. Everyone has a story, so it's not strange to have a story. District D, District C, District B, District A. The journey was smooth, and the door opened. Very soon, Bufang and the others landed in District A. After 1,000 years, the destroyed District A had already been restored to its original state. In the distance, in the Queen of Curses' palace, the raging power of the curse was spreading. The little girl, Kersey, looked at Bufang in surprise. "You're still alive," Little Curse said. Hua was excited to see Bufang, Lord Go, and the others. She originally thought that Bufang was dead. She didn't expect Bufang to be standing here unscathed. That was great. Lord Go raised his claws and touched Hua's head. Lord Go was gratified to see that the little snake had grown into the enormous heaven-devouring python it was today. It felt good to be nurtured like this. At least, it was much more interesting than facing Bufang's unchanging face. There was only one interesting soul, but there were thousands of interesting bodies. Duchess Yunlan, Duchess Nightmare, Duchess Tianlian, and the other counts, viscounts, and other nobles of Void City had come to greet Bufang. After 1,000 years, it was not easy for them to forget Bufang. Now that they saw Bufang again, they could only sigh. The former little chef had grown to a level that they could only look up to. Perhaps this was the legendary evildoer. Bufang looked at Kersey, raised a hand, and flicked her on the forehead. Kersey squatted on the ground, covering her forehead with her hand. Xiao Ai stared at Bufang excitedly. "Owner Bu, you're back." Bufang nodded at her, then turned to look at the Queen of Curses' palace. Looking at it, Bufang's face grew serious. The Queen of Curses' palace, everyone looked towards the palace. At this moment, the entire palace was enveloped by a powerful aura. If the people present were familiar with it, they would know that it was the Queen's aura. She might really inherit the Queen of Curses will soon. The dukes were very excited. After all, with the Queen's return, Void City would no longer be the weakest of the 4 universes. The primitive universe had the primitive will of the Great Path, the Soul Demon universe had the Soul God, and the chaotic universe had Bufang. Before this, without the Queen of Curses, Void City basically had no right to speak. However, once the Queen of Curses appeared, everything would change. When the Queen dominated the universe, the 4 universes were very afraid of her. The Queen of Curses was also an ancestor god. She was a top expert. Only experts of the same level had the right to speak. The queen is about to be born. Duchess Tianlian was very excited. The three dukes were all loyal supporters of the queen, but, among the three, the one who was the most loyal to the queen was probably Duchess Tianlian. Bufang frowned slightly. Hades' era was melancholy. He held a spicy strip between his lips. Wu Shuang, who was standing beside him, was slightly puzzled when he heard Hades' era sighing with emotion. "Why are you sighing?" Wu Shuang asked. Hades' era glanced at Wu Shuang. "What do you know, young man? Get out of my way." After that, he began to sigh again. "Back in those days, when I suppressed the heavens, even Bufang young man and Nethery girl had to tremble under my pressure," said Bufang. "But now they are all stronger than I. Even that iron lump Bai has caught up with I. What do you, a young man, know about this kind of loneliness and discomfort?" Hades' era looked up at the dark sky with melancholy. His eyes were deep. "Where should I put my heart on a lonely night?" Alas, the corner of Wu Shuang's mouth twitched. Shaking his head, he glanced at Nether King Erha, giving him a look that told him to figure it out by himself. "No wonder His Excellency told me not to hang out with Hades' era. His Excellency is afraid that I will be infected." This retard rumble. A terrible aura filled the air. In the void, one figure after another flew over. Mu Hongzhi came with summer in the air, stepping on the cheerful background music. Summer has passed quietly, leaving behind a little secret. I can't tell you. The cheerful atmosphere dispersed the sad atmosphere that Hades' era had been building for a long time. Hades' era was very angry. He squinted at Mu Hongzhi, trying to let him feel the surging anger in his heart with his eyes. He wanted to let him know how terrible it was to offend a lonely man. Mu Hongzhi, of course, chose to ignore him. He came to Bufang's side, clasped his hands behind his back, and looked at the Queen of Curses' palace in awe. The Queen of Curses, a supreme existence with a deep bond with the god of cooking. Mu Hongzhi said. Bufang glanced at him. "This fellow seems to know a lot of gossip." Mu Hongzhi shook his head. "Don't look at me. I don't know anything." The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. He looked at the Queen of Curses' palace again, where the power of curses was boiling. Bufang narrowed his eyes. He wondered how long this inheritance would last. The Queen of Curses' inheritance is not so easy to accept. It's not as easy and simple as the god of cooking's inheritance, Mu Hongzhi said. Rumble. Sure enough, as soon as Mu Hongzhi's voice rang out, the whole void city was shaken. Bufang, many experts of the primitive universe have descended to the ancestral planet to snipe Soul God. Don't you want to go with them? Mu Hongzhi asked, puzzled. It's not that easy to snipe them. What is Soul God's heart? Is it a man or an object? Where is it sealed? They don't know anything, so they can't do anything even if they descend to the mortal world. Bufang said. He had planned to go to Earth first to seal Soul God's heart, but he failed to do so even after asking the human emperor on the ancestral planet. If others went to snipe him, they would not find anything either. So Bufang was not in a hurry. Even if he was, there was nothing he could do. I might as well help you inherit the Queen's will first. Then, perhaps you can help in the war. Bufang said, twitching the corner of his mouth. Creak, just as the crowd was talking, a rumble rang out. Everyone froze. They all turned to look at the Queen of Curses' palace. There, a plume of black smoke emerged. The Stairway of Star had reappeared. The Stairway of Star, flashing with the light of the starry sky, stood at the top of the sky. Everyone was looking up. Suddenly, the Stairway of Star shattered. It split down the middle. A coffin appeared once more and slowly floated up into the air. It's the Queen of Curses' coffin. The nobles of Void City were excited. Many people knelt on the ground with fanatical looks on their faces. Bufang put his hands behind his back and looked at the coffin. A bowl of steaming fried rice was placed on the coffin, just as he had seen it 1,000 years ago. There was no doubt that this fried rice was a god of cooking dish. In the past, Bufang might not have been able to feel it, but now, he could clearly sense that this fried rice was a god of cooking dish. Even with Bufang's current level, he could not cook this bowl of fried rice. Bufang's mental force poured out and enveloped the fried rice. Bufang was shocked. This fried rice was not simple at all. The emotions nurtured in it shocked even Bufang. However, there was a tinge of ruthlessness mixed within the intense emotions. Bufang, who walked the emotional path now, was very sensitive to all this. The fried rice on the coffin was shaking. It was as if this bowl of fried rice was preventing you from inheriting. Rumble! A muffled creak rang out. The coffin was slowly pushed open. In the coffin, there seemed to be a familiar figure lying inside. That figure, it's you, but it doesn't seem to be you. It's like the Queen of Curses. Bufang's pupils constricted slightly. He sensed that something was amiss. The will that the Queen of Curses had inherited contained terrible resentment, hatred, and killing intent. Something's not right, Bufang said. His brows furrowed, and there was a hint of solemnity in his voice. He stared at the coffin. The fried rice on the coffin was exuding a unique aura. The power of curses was wrapped around the coffin like a cocoon. Resentment, hatred, if he allowed the inheritance to continue, Bufang felt that the consequences would be unimaginable. You might be overwhelmed by these negative emotions and turn into the demonized Queen of Curses with the accumulation of resentment and hatred. While the nobles of Void City were in a frenzy, Bufang appeared beside Kersey, who was squatting on the ground with her hands on her forehead. He reached out a finger and touched the girl's forehead. The aura of resentment and hatred rushed into Kersey's spirit sea. Frightened, Kersey took a few steps back. What is this? Are you familiar with this aura? Is this the aura of the Queen of Curses? Bufang asked with a straight face. He seemed to sense the seriousness of the matter. No. It's definitely not like this. Although I'm only the Queen's soul clone, I can guarantee that the Queen's original aura is not like this. Although the Queen of Curses is cold, she is actually a woman who is cold on the outside but warm on the inside, Kersey said. Bufang nodded. In that case, Bufang raised his head and looked at the coffin hovering in midair. He took a deep breath. Then the problem lies in the Queen of Curses, who is lying in the coffin at this moment. Could it be the Queen's corpse? Bufang said. As soon as he finished speaking, he took a step forward. It was as if he had compressed the space around him. Then, he appeared in front of the stairway of star. Everyone was stunned. Then, their expressions changed drastically. Wu Shuang's eyes widened. Is His Excellency going to cause trouble again? With a spicy strip dangling from his lips, Hades-Era's eyes lit up. Sure enough, Bufang is still as good at stirring up trouble as ever. Lord Go frowned. Mu Hongzhi paused as well. The nobles kneeling on the ground, on the other hand, turned pale. Bufang, what are you doing? The three dukes rose to their feet at the same time, exclaiming and shouting. However, Bufang ignored them. He raised his hand and grabbed the bowl of warm fried rice. Then, he reached out and lightly knocked on the coffin. It was as if he was knocking on a door. The next moment, a suction force suddenly came from the coffin. With a swoosh, Bufang was sucked into it. With a swoosh, Bufang was sucked into it. Come in and be buried with me. Come in and be buried with me. Chapter 1839. In an instant, this beautiful garden was engulfed by the power of the curse. He raised his head and looked at the door at the end of the corridor. Why did the Queen of Curses pull him here? The secret was in this wooden hut. The Queen of Curses demanded. There was no soul god in the void. The terrifying power of the curse surged around her body. He didn't communicate with the Queen in words. He just cooked a bowl of fried rice for her, carrying the memories of when they met in the prime of their youth. She was the kind of person who would be drowned by ordinary people if thrown into a sea of people. You walked out of the kitchen. This woman was the real queen of curses. The god of cooking didn't seem to hear her. His power was unparalleled, and he could suppress heaven and earth. Before Bufang could say anything, the woman opened the door, turned, and stepped into it. At this moment, Bufang was watching everything that had happened from the perspective of the god of cooking. It flowed slowly. The god of cooking said that he wanted to go to the top with the emotional path. Bit by bit, it wrapped around Bufang's body. It seemed to divide everything in two. The door of the wooden hut opened automatically, as if to welcome Bufang. But very quickly, this strand of anticipation disappeared. Bufang looked as if he had seen a ghost. Was this something you would say? He seemed to have noticed something strange. On this day, he had just climbed the stairs, and he was a little worried that the old stairs would suddenly rot and collapse. Bufang furrowed his brows and went upstairs. You said. Hiss, there were no fancy battles, no earth-shattering rumbles. A weathered voice came from Bufang's mouth. However, he still couldn't break the seal of the curse power. The queen's whispers kept ringing. You put down her bowl and chopsticks and looked at Bufang with a smile. She raised her black dagger. Creak. The power of the curse gradually wrapped around Lin Fan. Bufang walked with his hands clasped behind his back. Aren't these days wonderful? Soul God had appeared, but no one had expected him to do so in such a way, said the Queen of Curses coldly. Her words were ice-cold. To become a paragon, one must be emotionless. Can you really be emotionless? He felt a chill run down his spine. It dived rapidly towards the bottom of the sea. However, it was obvious that his worries were unnecessary. Hold this dagger and stab it into the stinky chef's body. Then you will complete the ruthless path and become the true Lord of Void City, the supreme cursed ancestral god. The god of cooking was divided into two. One half was sole god of the ruthless path, and the other was the god of cooking of the emotional path. Wash your hands, then you can eat. This smell seemed to exude a feeling that made one's soul throb. An ice-cold aura spread out and seemed to wrap around his body bit by bit. Unfortunately, the life the two of them lived was truly like that of a celestial couple. Previously, Bufang thought there might be some melodramatic love story between the Queen of Curses, the god of cooking, and the soul god. The table, the chairs, the shabby porcelain bowls, the walls, the windows, and the floor, the colors were warm and gentle. Bufang looked at the god of cooking in the sky. Bufang did not say anything and just ate quietly. Bufang paused and looked over. The god of cooking roared. Bufang frowned. He reached out a hand and placed it on the table. He had waged war against the chaotic universe, Void City, and even the primitive universe. They had only sensed such a level of curse power from the Queen of Curses. 100 years had passed in the blink of an eye. Oh! Almost in the blink of an eye, he came to the door. They never thought that such a change would happen. Soul God's life was endless. What happened in the coffin was not good. Looking at you, he found that the woman in front of him was like you, but not like you at the same time. The conversation between the two continued. At the end of the road, a woman stood quietly. A thud rang out. She wanted to see him take the last step. Kill him. The dish was delicious. Even with Bufang's picky eyes, it was hard for him not to find fault with it. Everything in front of her had disappeared. Is this a joke? But she was still looking forward to it. The severed 7 emotions turned into the power of 7 sins, entangling the god of cooking's body. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched slightly. However, slowly, under the deliberate guidance of the shadow, he walked down the corridor on the 2nd floor. Bufang frowned. Bufang was sure that this was not his voice. This was the real Queen of Curses. In the distance there was a small wooden hut. The power that could rip off Soul God's clothes was blocked by the power of the curse. This was the source of his confidence after becoming strong. You? But the Queen of Curses stared blankly at everything. The corner of Bu Fang's mouth twitched. With her realm, she knew very well that if she embarked on the ruthless path, the life of an immortal couple would be gone forever. The wooden hut sat quietly in the distance. Soul God had become a terrible demon in the universe. He had slaughtered an entire universe, which was the Soul Demon universe, and dominated the starry sky. He followed her quietly. The Queen of Curses' body disappeared in an instant and hovered beside you. Bu Fang paused. Everything had a vertical line. Nearly 6,000 words, 2 in a big chapter. There was a plate of braised fish, a bowl of soup, and a plate of vegetables. After all, this young couple was living a good life. Bu Fang followed her. However, the mountains in the distance were turquoise, and the sky was blue like a gem. It was just like when Bu Fang first set foot here. The world was filled with strong resentment and hatred. A strong aroma of food wafted over. Yu's body slowly emerged. Bu Fang was pulled into the coffin. Darkness began to engulf him. He had a feeling that something was not quite right. The god of cooking had severed his 7 emotions and 6 desires. His voice carried a sense of confidence. The door swung open. At this moment, the wooden hut was very gentle and peaceful. Is the Queen of Curses really coming back to life? Bu Fang frowned. Power surged, and the dust on his hands disappeared. His hands became clean again. Their surprise did not last long. The person in the kitchen was none other than Bu Fang found himself back in the wooden hut. The dishes were served, and they were a few simple dishes. It's the Queen of Curses. The surroundings seemed to be a wasteland. The power of the emotional path was attacking the soul god. Bu Fang frowned. The suffocating feeling of the water pressure pressing down on his chest made him frown. He could not believe that such a great force would come out of the coffin and suck Bu Fang's body into it. However, her aura soared into the sky, and streams of light fell and wrapped around her. The moment the door closed, the whole wooden hut began to decay and shake. She stood up anxiously, her beautiful face full of disbelief. The previous wooden hut was like a haunted house. In the kitchen, Yu's voice rang out again. Rumble. Bu Fang opened his mouth and blew bubbles. His surroundings changed again. He scolded the heavens, the earth, and the air. All of a sudden, ruthlessness and emotion began to shake his will crazily. However, he was engulfed in an instant. Boom. It was a very ordinary middle-aged man. He was not handsome, and he did not have any memorable features. Such a person was about to soar to the highest level. In the distance, everything in the wooden hut was drawn in a cold vertical line. It was you. That was because what had just happened had caused many people to sink into contemplation. The green grass was spread out, and there were crystal drops of water hanging on the tender leaves of the grass. He stopped in his tracks. In the end, it turned into a huge black cocoon and completely wrapped Bu Fang up. You, or rather, the Queen of Curses, leaned against the door of the wooden hut and looked at the god of cooking, who was slowly stepping into the air. Bu Fang's pupils constricted. He found that his body was suddenly descending. In the sky, the appearance of this unforeseen event caused everyone to be abruptly shocked. You seemed to be gradually convinced. It was as if she was whispering to you. This feeling made Bu Fang very uncomfortable. Bu Fang could not learn that kind of emotion. Without hesitation, Bu Fang took a step and flew toward the door. At this moment, Bu Fang finally saw the god of cooking's face clearly. Besides, how could you know how to cook? Just when Soul God's power was peerless, Bu Fang paused. He found that he could not control his body and was walking toward the bathroom. It transformed into Bu Fang's face. One by one, white rotting worms flew out from the template. His heroic spirit was bursting out, suppressing the universe. The Queen of Curses had gone mad. Didn't you say you want to reach the highest level with the emotional path? The Queen of Curses stood in Void City and looked at the old man. Then what is your cooking path? emotional or ruthless. Rumble. Although this method was terrible, he was not afraid. After all, with his current cultivation base, unless his opponent was an ancestral god, Bufang had nothing to fear. A fragrance wafted over. The Queen of Curses was furious. She felt as if she had been deceived. The scrolls were divided in two by a vertical line. With his hands clasped behind his back, Bufang walked toward the wooden hut. Judging from the aura that erupted just now, it was very likely that the Queen of Curses had mutated. The improvement of her cultivation base was just a change in her life. A small river flowed in front of the door. The sticky and uncomfortable feeling made Bufang withdraw his mental force. This wooden hut looked exactly the same as the previous one, but the style was completely different. He reached out a hand and grabbed the door handle. Suddenly, in the sky, however, that's right. The way they saw it, the purity of the curse power caused them to exclaim in astonishment. Bufang frowned and walked toward the kitchen. He was very fast. The power of sin filled every corner of the universe. Therefore, she wanted to stop the god of cooking. No wonder the Queen of Curses hated the chef so much. The god of cooking had begun to break through to the ancestral god realm. His next goal was to conquer the chaotic universe. Xiao Bai was extremely powerful. He was able to fight Soul God head-on, so he was definitely the strongest existence in the universe now. She used to look forward to life. Bufang stared at the void with a complicated look on his face. It was very rich and intoxicating. Soon, he was close to the hut. He pushed the door open. The vow, the happiness, and the carefree life he once had were all gone. When he released his mental force, it was filled with the rich curse power. Because he realized that someone seemed to be secretly spying on him. The dukes, counts, and nobles were all pleasantly surprised. He had become immortal, and he knew that he only had 100 years to live. The once high-spirited god of cooking was now very old. However, he had chosen a neutral path between the emotional path and the ruthless path. She felt the cold of being deceived. The old man had taken away Soul God's heart. You put down her chopsticks and asked anxiously. Gulp. Great. Our void city is going to rise under the Queen's leadership. Bufang did not refute. Meanwhile, the god of cooking's aura gradually reached a limit. Heaven and earth returned to normal once again. He walked slowly in the wooden hut. The expressions of Lord Go, Hades' Era, Mu Hongzi, and the others changed dramatically. The cocoon squirmed. Many people's faces were filled with uncertainty. The three dukes sighed when they sensed the curse power. Sure enough, this woman is not you. All she yearned for was to live a simple life with her lover like a celestial couple. Bufang did not know what to say to this poor woman. Darkness had engulfed her life. Bufang's expression changed. Little by little, it moved forward. In midair, the god of cooking gave the Queen of Curses an apologetic look. The Queen of Curses could not reach the peak with the emotional path. Bufang found that the scenery behind the door was completely different. It was tearing at his body. Endless resentment and anger washed over him. The door upstairs squeaked softly. A female voice came from the kitchen. Something was not right. The 7 emotions he had severed gathered in midair, turned into a terrible demon, and began to devour him. The god of cooking, on the other hand, had only 100 years as a mortal. Bufang focused his eyes. Here it comes. He tore open the void and left this part of the world. A puzzled look came into Bufang's eyes. The river dried up, the trees withered, the power of the curse spread. After reading the Queen of Curses' memories, Bufang watched with a strange look on his face. What shocked Bufang even more was that he actually opened his mouth to speak. It was always the most helpless thing to turn love into hate. The Queen of Curses, on the other hand, was looking forward to it. She had given up everything to become an ancestral god. He walked toward the hut. The Queen of Curses, who used to be a pretty girl from a humble family, had changed. Bufang walked over. Bit by bit, he stabbed Bufang's heart. He wanted to use this wisp of the emotional path to break through to the supreme realm. I believe I can reach the supreme realm with the emotional path, the god of cooking said. Bufang sighed. He had thought of the beginning, but not the ending. Boom. Was it the Queen of Curses' will? Something had happened. But there was another figure. They wanted to get close to the coffin, but they were blocked by a powerful force. Bufang landed on the ground. She knew how to be satisfied. She was already very satisfied with her current cultivation base and life. After that day the dishes were simple, but it was like living at home. You're back? Sit down and eat. The god of cooking was gradually covered and entangled by darkness. It was quite dirty. This is the right way to open it. Laugh? Soul God's power suddenly disappeared. It kept erupting. Suddenly, however, Bufang did not care. Bufang frowned. He felt that things were not that simple. In the blink of an eye, a black dagger appeared in front of her. Her black cloak fluttered slowly behind her. Finally, she became cold. She was like a bucket that had been filled with a drop of water every day. After a long time, it was finally full and could not hold any more. It should have nothing to do with Soul God. Quick! Kill this chef. He could even see fish swimming in the clear water. Bufang frowned. If he remembered correctly, the god of cooking had succeeded. In the sky, Bufang found that the floor under his feet was beginning to crumble. The life that the Queen of Curses yearned for had disappeared with the death of the god of cooking. The god of cooking, who was covered by the 7 emotions, had become Soul God. He mercilessly broke through the void and became the most terrible demon in the universe. It seemed that Bufang had finally arrived. Behind him, a woman shrouded in curses stared at him. Gradually, she approached the black cocoon. Her temperament was completely different. Chefs are all up to no good. The atmosphere was peaceful. The grass grew long and the nightingales flew. The traitor left the Queen of Curses behind. She aimed at the cocoon. Yu's eyes were slightly glazed. Holding the dagger, she walked forward step by step. The scene disappeared. The lawless soul god had only taken a bite of the dish. The Queen of Curses, on the other hand, turned into a plume of black smoke and hugged Nethery from behind. Her hand, which was made of curse power, held Nethery's hand and grabbed the dagger. What pure curse power! Zhang Xian murmured. Could it be? In the distance, lush trees stretched on, and some lazy spirit beasts could be seen crawling on the trees. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. The pursuit of true culinary arts has always been my goal. I'm only one step away. You should support me. As a chef who was a little obsessed with cleanliness, even though Bufang had grown to his current level, he had not changed this habit. You actually smiled? Bufang's consciousness seemed to be gradually extracted, and he looked at everything from the perspective of a bystander. Bufang found that he had come to the end. The old man came to Soul God with a dish in his hand. Perhaps what had happened in the coffin? The dagger floated for a moment and then hovered over Bufang's heart. It was none other than the god of cooking, who adhered to the emotional path. 100 years had passed. His fleshly body had decayed, and his Tao had vanished. Bufang frowned. He slowly turned around. The warm scene was gone forever. The seed of emotion burned in his strong heart. His face was 90% similar to Yu's. This was a very dilapidated wooden house. Everywhere was dilapidated, but it could be seen that this small wooden house had once been inhabited by people. The door was closed. He felt as if he had sunk to the bottom of the sea. The terrible curse power was released. However, he did not completely sever it. There was still a wisp of emotion left. Like an invisible knife, it cut off his 7 emotions and 6 desires. A loud rumble rang out. Billowing smoke and dust surged between heaven and earth. This was probably the world inside the coffin. She was dressed like a housewife. Time passed. Soul God did not appear at all. She believed that the god of cooking could reach the peak with the emotional path. Then, they could continue to live like an immortal couple. Xiao Bai leaped up. His golden mechanical eyes burst into a dazzling light as he threw a punch at the Queen of Curses' palace. Bufang looked around but did not see you. Unfortunately, life had given her a hard blow. Behind him, the experts of the various universes attacked at the same time, tearing apart their bodies and sealing them. The days passed by one after another. Where exactly was this place? Suddenly Bufang continued to watch. The emotions were very rich. However, it was blocked by the power of the curse that was descending from the sky. In the sky, the shadow seemed to be pulling Bufang. Did he succeed? Now it seemed that the god of cooking finally made his choice. There seemed to be a figure busy in the kitchen. You are cooking? Then why is it only for a lifetime? The wooden hut was warmly decorated, with green plants and hanging baskets. On the ground, the Queen of Curses, who was leaning against the door and watching expectantly, also changed her expression. He continued to attack, pulling out strands of emotion one after another. It was the end. When he reached the second floor, a shadow seemed to be disappearing quickly in the distance. But it wasn't his voice that came out. An old man appeared in the starry sky. The god of cooking, who was holding Soul God's heart, disappeared into the starry sky. His eyes lit up as if he had thought of something. Although it has Yu's face, that means, for some reason, this corridor had become extremely long. Both sides of the corridor were full of hanging paintings. Bufang hesitated for a moment, then walked in. He needed to make a choice between the two. Pitch-black armor covered her body, and her hair swirled around her, curling upwards continuously. She washed her hands, sat quietly at the table, and waited for the dish. The Queen of Curses growled. The table was simple and dusty. As he touched it, a thick layer of dust gathered on his hand. He continued to walk in. Chapter 1840. Yu's eyes were lifeless, as if she was being controlled, or as if she had sunk into the endless void. She was holding a black dagger, which was condensed by the power of the curse. The power of the curse gathered on it like poisonous insects, turning it into a cold dagger. Little by little, it approached Bufang's heart. She wanted to pierce Bufang's heart with the dagger. Once the heart was pierced, Bufang would die. Bufang's body was entangled by the power of the curse, and he could not move. His face was exposed, and his eyes were closed. At this moment, he seemed to be paralyzed by the power of darkness. Yu approached step by step. The dagger was hovering in front of Bufang's chest. Puff. The dagger was pressed against his chest. Yes, that's it. The Queen of Curses' body was like a wisp of smoke. Her eyes had turned completely black, and her black hair was like wriggling poisonous insects. She leaned close to Yu's ear and whispered. Nethery was like a puppet that was being controlled, numbly moving forward. The Queen of Curses' resentment was extremely terrifying. It drifted between heaven and earth, causing the whole world to rumble. Outside the Queen of Curses' palace, no one knew what was going on. They didn't know what was going on inside the palace. They could only wait and see what would happen to Bufang after he was sucked in. Xiao Bai punched several times but failed to destroy the restaurant. He gave up and sat quietly in front of the palace. In the palace, the black power of the curse kept climbing onto Bufang's face. The tip of the dagger approached, the power of the curse slowly swirled, turning into a vortex, revealing the vermilion robe under the power of the curse. The dagger plunged down, and the power of the curse dispersed. Finally, the dagger fell on the vermilion robe and sank into it. The Queen of Curses' cold laughter resounded between heaven and earth, filled with endless resentment. She raised her hand and covered Yu's eyes. Child, keep going down and pierce through this chef's heart. You will cut off all emotions and become the supreme Queen of Curses. The Queen of Curses' murmur rang in Yu's ears. Suddenly, the falling dagger suddenly froze. He couldn't go any further. The Queen of Curses was stunned and raised her head. He looked at Bufang, who was wrapped in the power of the curse. Bufang's eyes slowly opened, and the god of cooking's eye burst out. That gaze, the Queen of Curses froze for a few seconds, then let out a shrill roar. His voice seemed to cut through the sky and tear the sky apart. This familiar gaze made the Queen of Curses restless. Boom! Bufang looked on calmly. The power of the curse on his body melted like ice and snow, dispersing one after another. He raised his hand. A bowl of fried rice slowly floated in his hand. That fried rice was not cooked by Bufang. It was the bowl of fried rice placed on top of the coffin. Have you tasted it? Bufang asked indifferently, looking at the Queen of Curses. There was no emotion in his voice, as if he was a ruthless judge. This fried rice was the dish that the aging god of cooking had cooked for the queen at the end of his life. What he wanted to say and express might have been hidden in this bowl of fried rice. However, perhaps even the god of cooking himself did not expect that the Queen of Curses would not eat this fried rice until she died. I won't eat this stinking chef's dish again. I won't eat it even if I die. The Queen of Curses was like a swimming fish, swimming quickly in this world that belonged to her. This was the world inside the coffin, which could also be said to be her sea of consciousness. The power of the curse around her was very strong. Even with Bufang's current cultivation base, he could barely resist it. How could the Queen of Curses die when she was so powerful? Bufang might not know. However, sensing the Queen's resentment, perhaps Bufang understood a little. It was resentment that led to the Queen of Curses' death. Although she had severed her 7 emotions and chosen the ruthless Tao, she could not truly sever them, so she embarked on a path of no return. This was also the reason why she resented the chef. Why she could not sever her last trace of emotion until she died. You stood numbly in place. Under the Queen of Curses' control, she held the dagger and kept walking toward Bufang. Suddenly, a tiny flame appeared on his body and began to burn. It was the divine fire. When Bufang stepped on the fire of the emotional Tao, it became more and more simple, as if it had turned into an ordinary fire. However, it was a world of difference from ordinary fire. Perhaps only by sensing it personally could one feel its extraordinary nature. You held the dagger and slowly stabbed it toward Bufang. The curse power gathered behind Nethery, and in the blink of an eye, a huge, roaring cursed serpent appeared behind her. Roar! The roar rang out. The whole space was shaking. Under Bufang's feet, the soil was flying and gravel was rolling. The terrifying aura seemed to dig 3 feet into the ground. The dagger, wrapped by the giant snake, stabbed toward Bufang, trying to pierce Bufang's heart with one move. You seemed to have become super fierce under the power of the curse. Of course, Bufang was very calm. That calmness and composure came from the heart. He raised his hand. A flame was burning on his finger. He pointed at the center of the cursed snake's eyebrows. It was as if he had touched the tip of a dagger. A drop of scarlet blood appeared. The power of the curse behind you collapsed, and the cursed snake completely collapsed. A bowl of steaming hot dragon blood rice appeared in front of him. Bufang held it and waved it in front of you. Do you want to eat it? Bufang asked. The light in Yu's eyes seemed to be slowly recovering, and she kept nodding. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. With a flick of his finger, the dragon blood rice flew into Yu's hand. Yu threw away the dagger with a clang. Holding the dragon blood rice, she began to gorge herself. With every bite, the darkness on her body receded a little. In the end, the resentment wrapped around Yu dissipated. Is it delicious? Bufang asked. It's delicious, Yu nodded. Bufang patted Yu's head. He turned to look at the Queen of Curses. You try it. Bufang raised the bowl of fried rice cooked by the god of cooking. What the god of cooking wanted to say might be contained in this bowl of fried rice. The Queen of Curses looked at Yu, who was eating with relish, and was a little speechless for a moment. Her 1,000 years of teaching, was not as good as a bowl of dragon blood rice. For chefs, we usually don't express what we want to say through our mouth. Most of the time, we express ourselves through the dishes. Most of the time, it's through the dishes, Bufang said lightly. With his hands behind his back, he walked slowly toward the Queen of Curses. The emotions we want to express will be expressed through the dishes, especially after we walk the emotional path. What the god of cooking wants to say to you is also contained in this dish. Do you really not want to know? Bufang asked again. He took step after step. The flames burned, and the power of curses receded. In the Queen of Curses' home court, Bufang was as relaxed as if he were at home. No. The Queen of Curses hissed. The Queen of Curses roared. Her eyes were full of resentment and unwillingness. She had been deceived. They had promised to grow old together, but the god of cooking had aged alone and decayed in heaven and earth. All that was left was boundless pain for her. The Queen of Curses roared. She was ferocious and terrifying. Suddenly Bufang grabbed a spoonful of fried rice and stuffed it into the Queen of Curses' mouth. Women are terrible when they are stubborn. I'm afraid the god of cooking didn't expect you to be so stubborn. Bufang stuffed a spoonful of fried rice into the Queen of Curses' mouth and said indifferently. The rumbling space came to a standstill. There was no terrible explosion, no earth-shattering rumble. The whole space fell silent all of a sudden. Bufang looked at the Queen of Curses, and the emotions in his eyes became complicated. He couldn't help but take a step back. He exhaled faintly. This woman was too scary. Cooking was more comfortable. The Queen of Curses chewed in a daze. The familiar taste permeated her taste buds and enveloped her tongue. The perfectly round rice grains, the warm and fragrant taste, seeped into her body drop by drop, subtly affecting her body. It was an indescribable feeling. The darkness around her body was dispelled in this warmth. A spot of light emerged in the distance. A figure in a white robe slowly walked over from afar and looked at her with a smile. Just like in the past, he looked back in the waning lights. As the figure sped over, he reached out his big, warm hand, stroked her face, and murmured. 2 lines of tears rolled down the Queen of Curses' cheeks. Bufang clasped his hands behind his back and looked at the Queen of Curses. In the distance, she was tearing up and eating the fried rice. He sighed with emotion. The darkness around him began to slowly dissipate. Like ice that would not melt for 10,000 years, it was smiling. The beautiful scenery returned. The clear spring water flowed through the Rocky Mountains. The green grass and lush trees. The lazy spirit beast Bufang couldn't help but nod at the familiar scene. The knot in the Queen of Curses' heart was indeed that bowl of fried rice. She stubbornly refused to eat it, but it would only bind her for thousands of years. In fact, everything was just a matter of eating a mouthful of fried rice. Bufang shook his head, the corners of his mouth curling upward. Women! In the distance, the collapsed wooden hut seemed to be rebuilt with the passage of time. The wooden hut was quickly restored to its original appearance. Accompanied by the singing of birds and the fragrance of flowers, it was a scene of contentment. Bufang took a deep breath. Bufang! I've finished eating. Give me another bowl. Yu's cold voice rang out. Bufang took a deep breath. Before he could exhale, he choked and coughed. Bufang thumped his chest and glanced at Yu, who had an innocent look on her face. He felt a little helpless. With a flip of his hand, another bowl of dragon blood rice appeared. He was about to hand it to Yu. Suddenly, the scene in front of him suddenly changed. Rumble! It was as if a huge gust of wind had blown over. Bufang opened his eyes. His vision returned to normal. Bufang sat cross-legged on the coffin, looking slightly dazed. In his hand, he was holding a plate of fried rice. In the coffin, Yu slowly straightened her body. Yu was holding a bowl of dragon blood rice and eating it. Bufang looked at Yu, who had a grain of rice on the corner of her mouth. He could not help but twitch the corner of his mouth and shake his head. Rumble! At the same time, a black crystal appeared between her brows. Her aura began to rise rapidly, and it continued to rise. In an instant, it reached a terrifying level. Bufang could not help but sigh as he sensed Yu's aura. You have completely mastered the Queen of Curses inheritance. Unfortunately, you did not complete the ruthless path, so her cultivation base could not break through to the ancestral god level. But that was enough. Sitting on the coffin, Bufang raised a hand and rubbed Yu's head. Outside, the nobles of Void City, Mu Hongzi, Xiaobai, Hades Era, and the others all saw this scene. His heart, which had been hanging in the air, was finally at ease. The Queen of Curses was, after all, an ancestral god. If something happened to Bufang, it would be too late to cry. Now it seemed that everyone was happy. Creak. The door of the Queen of Curses palace slowly opened. Bufang walked out with his hands clasped behind his back. You walked out while eating fried rice. She looked as if she was going to eat back all the fried rice she had lost for 1,000 years. The bronze coffin fell back into the stairway of star and was buried deep under the Queen of Curses palace. As for what the god of cooking and the queen had said in the end, Bufang did not know. No one knew. They could only treat it as a secret and bury it in the dust of history. Welcome, Queen of Curses. You walked out of the Queen of Curses palace. The nobles of Void City were so excited that they could not express it in word. Duchess Yunlan, Duchess Nightmare, and Duchess Tianlian took the lead and knelt down respectfully. Then all the counts and viscounts knelt down. It was a spectacular scene. At this moment, Void City, which had been loose, seemed to have become a rope with a soul. Oh! Kersey looked at all this with satisfaction. Suddenly, she seemed to have sensed something. She raised her hand, and her somewhat illusory body gradually became solid at this moment. She stared blankly. Originally, she was just the embodiment of a wisp of the Queen of Curses' will. But now, she seemed to have become a real person. Swoosh, the nobles, who were kneeling on the ground, were also stunned. From the Queen of Curses' palace, bits of green began to spread. Then, it spread out and covered the entire Void City. The green light caused everyone to involuntarily look at it. The Queen of Curses' palace turned into 2 beams of light, which soared into the sky and sped toward the universe where Void City was located. Everything around the dead silent Void City was enveloped by the light and restored to its infinite vitality. The bone ship slowly faded away. The deathly silent star was also filled with vitality. It was overflowing with greenery, and there were even small pink flowers blooming one after another. All the nobles stared blankly at it. All of this was like a miracle. Bufang looked up at the 2 beams of light drifting in the starry sky. They seemed to have turned into 2 figures, nodding slightly at him. The corners of Bufang's mouth lifted slightly. The light turned into a shooting star, streaked across the starry sky, and disappeared into the universe. They seemed to be entangled forever, wandering at the end of eternity. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.